Okay.
All right. All right, folks. Welcome back to Castleguard Studios. Today we are doing another battle army faction focus. And the faction focus we're doing today is the Adepta Sororitas. Obviously, you guys know that. Otherwise, you guys wouldn't be here. So, but anyway, so yeah, we're going to do the faction focus just kind of like how we've been doing our other ones. We're trying a little bit different of the format today. We're kind of sticking with the podcast format for the moment. But our future ones will probably be more involved with a bit of a more formal format. That way you guys get an introduction to our army, what the armies kind of look like, and a little bit of a, I guess, just more formal, really. I mean,
Yeah.
but, you know, we've been enjoying this sit-down and chat discussion type format, and it's fun for us. So if you guys enjoy this, you know, make sure you guys leave a like on the channel, on the videos. Make sure you comment to let us know, and then you know, subscribe if you haven't already, and slap the notification bell so that way you guys don't miss any other content. But yeah, let's go ahead and kick things off today. So, like I said, we're talking Adepta Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle. Now they're still stuck in their 8th edition codex today, right?
Yes.
So, unfortunately, they don't quite have the 9th edition one yet. With that said, we know Is it Faith and what's it called? Faith and something.
Faith and piety or
Faith
something?
and something.
Something like that. I don't know.
Pain and piety, faith and I don't know. It's
new. Pain and piety sounds right.
It's the new Warhammer box set that's coming out here.
Yeah.
And that one's going to have Hesperax and piety and pain is what it's called. So yeah, it's going to have Hesperax in it, new model for her, and then Sisters of Battle are getting a new character. Now, the Palatine is a pretty interesting looking character. She's basically a lieutenant for the army. So that should be fairly interesting, something the army hasn't had, if at all, in a very long time. The options for the reroll wounds of 1 is pretty interesting. So so that's pretty cool. The model looks great. I'm hoping people will, if GW doesn't come out with them, I'm hoping GW will make some Celestians, but if they don't, that would probably be a good model to start with for conversion purposes.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Along with the Amalia Novena model that they came out with, and what's the other one called? The one that's got the cover art that they made with the the pistol out, and the hand down, clutching the. It's that special edition one they came out with not too long ago. I forget her name, but we have one here in the studio. So
yeah, I forgot her name.
Yeah, I can't. It beats me. But anyway, so those are like, I don't know, there's sisters, but most of them are designed to be like superiors or whatever the case is. And
lots of different poses.
A lot of them are really gorgeous sculpts, and the armor is just a little bit flashier than the originals, the regular Sisters of Battle. So I think it'll be kind of interesting to see some people do some interesting conversions with those, because I know out of all the armies in the game, people love to convert their sisters.
Oh yeah.
So it'll be really cool to see Pain and Piety when it comes out. Definitely looking forward to Drakari. But today we are talking Adepta Sororitas, the Sisters of Battle. So Mars, why don't you take your way and let us know what we can do with the army.
Right. So Sisters are one of those armies that it's a small crowd, but they are very devout followers to that army. It's been a long time since Sisters have gotten the love that they have today, and it's really good to see those sister players getting plastic models and updated rules, and an army that's quite fairly competitive. They still have their 8th edition codex, but they've transitioned over to 9th very well.
Yes, they have.
And have lots of competitive play styles.
Yeah, Mars and I definitely feel like out of all the codexes in the game, Sisters of Battle really, for 8th edition, transitioned perfectly well. Of course, I'm sure that's primarily because GW had that in mind when they were making the 8th edition codex, and it finally dropped. They did a good job on it. 8th edition was actually interesting because in 8th edition, they were all right, but 9th edition, they really improved.
It's
primarily just because of the format of the game and how the army plays. Not to say that they were bad in 8th edition at the end when the codex came out, but they really started to shine once 9th edition hit. You saw a lot of the drop-offs from a lot of the other armies. Sisters just skyrocketed up,
Yep.
and it's primarily just because their rules are just so well done.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be interesting to see what a codex for 9th edition would look like for them. What
I
kind of changes, if they even need any.
I don't even know if they need much.
Yeah.
Like, there's not much in this book that's even like outdated or clunky or doesn't work because of ninth edition changeover.
Right. Yeah.
But starting off, basically their strongest mechanic is their miracle dice.
The faith, yeah, the acts of faith are going to be.
The Acts of Faith is a very special mechanic to them and is very powerful when used correctly.
Yep.
So basically, at the start of each of your phases, you gain a miracle dice.
It started well, it's not command phase, but it started the turn, right? So you get a miracle
Yeah, at the
dice.
start of at the beginning of each battle round.
So yeah, so once a turn at the beginning of your, I guess it's not even the beginning of your turn, is it? Battle rounds.
Battle round,
So
yeah.
it's not player turn. Will be whoever's turn is going first.
Yep.
You'll get one during their turn, even if they go first. So.
Yep. So you gain one miracle dice, and what you do is you roll a die, and you keep that value, and you set it aside,
Yeah.
and you can later substitute that die for any die roll.
Well, most die rolls.
Most die
There
rolls.
are some limitations, but it's very, very broad.
Yep. So it's one of 8 options. You can use it for an advance roll, a charge roll, a deny the witch roll, a hit roll, a wound roll, a saving throw, a damage roll, or a miracle, or not miracle, morale test.
They can use it for a miracle.
So
Is it?
it's very it's very similar to the command rerolls in
Yeah.
which you can use. I'm pretty sure those are the only 7 you can use your command roll rolls on now in 9th.
Yeah.
In addition, you can use it on morale test because you can't reroll morale tests
right, yeah.
in 9th edition.
So in some ways, it's kind of a pain because you can't use it for a couple of things. Right off the top of my head, a few things that I would probably want to use it for would be like explosion results.
Explosion
Not
results,
being able to throw a miracle dice in for that.
number of
Kind of a
shots.
pain, but
Um,
there's a few things in there that it's. I mean, overall, they've blanket covered most of the
Yeah.
different types of roles you would want.
Yep.
But there are a few that are missing out, and it's fine. I mean, it doesn't affect the army enough to where it's necessary to have them. I think it'd be cute to throw those in there for those too, but
Yep.
I can understand why. I mean, there are miracle dice in each unit. You use.
Yep.
So it just comes down to their faith in the Emperor. I mean, is their faith
Yep.
really going to protect their tanks from blowing up? Maybe.
it might, and that's one of the most powerful effects of it is how many games have you played where you need a specific result? You need a 3 here, you need a 6 there,
Yeah.
you need a 1 here,
Yeah.
and Miracle Dice allows you to do that. Just
Well, yeah.
no randomness involved. Just I'm going to make it this result.
Yeah, and what makes it so interesting is that I mean, you're just starting off with 5 per game, bare minimum.
Bare
Base-
minimum,
Base.
and then you have other ways to get more.
And then there's several different ways to get more dice. I think we probably get into those here in a minute, but
Yep.
what's interesting is that you can use this in addition to your command points, in
Yep.
addition to command reroll stuff like that. So you can really supplement a lot of different dice rolls throughout a game. And you're not, I mean, even though there are some limitations to it, it's so broad that most scenarios you'll be able to cover without running into too many problems. And honestly, it unlocks a lot for the army. That the other armies in the game, they're
They don't have
they
anything
would love
like
to
this.
have this kind of stuff.
They don't
so,
have anything like this.
Now, to be fair, the Axe Faith have gone through several reworks. I thought all of them have been, for the most part, fairly decent. Back in I think the early 8th edition, there was you could fight twice, shoot twice, move twice.
Yeah.
Basically, you got an extra.
You got more like stratagems out
You
of
got an
them.
extra option
Yeah.
in the turn. And then when the first codex came out, the beta codex, then they reworked them to be like a whole different ball game, sort of
Yep.
similar to this, but not quite on this level. And then finally, in the end of 8th edition, when they came out with the real Army Codex,
Yep.
that fleshed out all the kinks that were an issue in the beta edition. So, the Miracle Dice have really been worked around to be great for the Army, and they fit well with the way the Army wants to play. So, definitely a positive for this Army.
Yep. So
we can go over the different abilities to gain Miracle Dice.
yeah, so once per battle round, you're going to get a Miracle Dice. So you're going to have 5 throughout the game. And then you also have certain ways to gain additional miracle dice once per phase.
Yeah, and it's per phase too.
Yeah, it's per phase.
Yeah.
So I don't think you can generate them in every phase, but like that's potentially 8 more miracle dice.
There's different ways
Yep.
in different phases to do it, and
So
yeah, it's pretty solid.
so if a unit with this ability destroys an enemy unit, you'll gain a faith dice.
Yeah.
If you have a character with this ability that is destroyed, you gain a faith dice. If you resist a psychic power, which we'll get into that later, they can do pretty easily, you gain a faith dice. And if you roll an unmodified 1 for your morale test, you get a miracle dice.
Yep. Now keep in mind, you can't use faith dice to pass these tests and then gain another miracle dice because of it.
Nope.
Miracle dice, when you utilize one, it prevents you from gaining the miracle dice for that action. But with that said, there's so many actions that happen throughout a turn, it's very unlikely that you won't gain at least a couple of extra miracle dice per turn.
Oh yeah.
And what's more is, and we'll get into the character data sheets here, there are many, many ways the characters, as well as other units in the army, will give you miracle dice.
Yeah, there's plenty of strats, Warlord Traits, they'll give you more miracle dice.
Throughout a game, I mean, just talking from experience of playing them, if you're not buried in miracle dice by the end of the game, you're generally not doing something right with the army. And it's because you can't spend them fast enough. You just keep gaining them.
Yep.
You can use them every phase and still burn through enough and have a ton left over. So
yeah, they're gonna be pretty even with like your command points numerically. You're gonna be gaining them every turn. You're gonna be spending them like wild and potentially using abilities to give them back.
But they don't have limits like command points, command dice do. So command, your command points, you only get so many, and you can only recover one per turn.
One per battle round.
Right. Yep. So you're not getting a whole lot back, and I mean at max, I think you can get 2 because you have the one you get back in the command phase, and you can get back another one through another source.
Yep.
Unless you're playing like Harlequins or something like that have an ability to get back multiple in one go.
Something goes around that restriction.
So you're still limited to what you can have for CP, and I mean you do start off with 12, which is really nice, and in the 2,000 point game. But with that said, miracle dice, I mean you're looking at probably getting 4 a turn at minimum throughout a game. And the thing is, as long as the army continues to keep playing, you're losing models, they're losing models. You're doing actions, you're going to continue to keep gaining more and more miracle dice. And like I said, you just cannot spend them fast enough. That's just been my experience. I'm sure there's probably people out there that find ways to spend them. It also comes down to how you play the army too.
Yeah.
But I covet my miracle dice just like I covet my command points. So you have to be very careful about how you spend them. And you want to use them in the right situations and not blow them when it's unnecessary to do so. So
they're a very skillful mechanic too, because you're going to be rolling these random numbers. You're going to have anywhere from a 1 to a 6 a result, and you need to know when to use things. Like, okay, I want to use this 5 for my hit roll. I want to use this 6 for my saving throw, and then I want to use this 1 for my morale.
Right.
And just planning ahead like that can be very, very intensive for players.
It's a busy mechanic, and it keeps you kind of on your toes all game long.
Yep.
But if you utilize it correctly, it's such a good mechanic that it almost
so
other armies.
Yeah, it can be so powerful because
well, especially with we'll get into more, like I said again, the data sheets later on down the road. But you look at certain units in the game that the sisters have, and they're already good without miracle dice help. But when you start throwing miracle dice in, the consistency, the accuracy.
The consistency is real good.
It's ridiculous. So that's partly why this army has become one of the more powerful armies in 9th edition. And you'll kind of see more as we go through this, just kind of quite what we're talking about here. So I guess that really covers the miracle.
That really kind of covers them.
We don't want to over cover anything on them, but we just kind of want to give a general idea of what you're looking at.
Just to give you a general idea, like how many times have you rolled for a melting gun and rolled a 1?
Yeah.
Whereas with the sisters, you can just make it a 6.
Yeah. Yeah.
No roll
being
necessary.
Able to just replace a die with another die and not even have to roll. It's pretty amazing. So, but we're gonna go ahead and cover some orders here real quick. The sisters. There's a page for that in here.
Yep. It's a little goofy.
But every army every army in 8th edition was given basically objectives secured for their units, so their troops and whatnot could collect objectives even if other units were on them, as long as they had more models, or they had the objective secured rule. So Sisters, of course, get that. But we're going to talk about the order convictions a little bit and kind of what each order means to the army, and kind of what you can do with each order. So just like in our other faction focuses, we've covered, like the Sept tenets for Tau. We covered
the dynasties for
Necrons.
Necrons.
This is the same thing for Sisters of Battle. They each have their own order. There's a total of 6 of them, I think.
Yep, there's just 6.
And all 6 of them, can have sub-factions. You can use them as such. You basically get to choose. And you're not, just like with every other army, you're not required to paint your army a specific scheme in order to use it that way. It just looks better when you bring it to the tabletop and you're saying, well, our Martyred Lady painted like our Martyred Lady. Makes sense. But you're still not held to that standard in most cases. You could show up and be like, well, today I'm playing Argent, Shroud or whatever the case is. So, but yeah, so first things on the list is our Martyred. It is Martyred Lady. Right?
Yep, our Martyred Lady.
So
Blood of the Martyrs.
The order trait, the conviction is. I think this is the one that gives you miracle dice for characters, right?
Well, no. When a character dies, you get an additional miracle die.
Yeah.
And then whenever when a unit from this order is destroyed, you gain a miracle die. So your characters give you 2, and then every other unit will give you 1 miracle die.
So this army is going to stack you up on miracle dice pretty well, as long as your army is getting bludgeoned throughout the game, which they probably should. I mean, the thing is, the Sisters are awkwardly durable, but they die fast enough to where you can still benefit from these traits.
Yeah.
Toughness 3 army-wide at best, unless you're talking like the big vehicles and stuff like that. All of their infantry, a lot of their flying units, pretty much everything they have is toughness 3 or, right on toughness 3.
Yeah.
I think literally the only infantry Sisters of Battle unit there is that's toughness 4 is Ephrael Stern. She's the only one.
Yep.
And I don't know why she's toughness 4. Something about her demonic possession, maybe. I don't know.
Lots of milk.
So she's the lone exception there. But with that said, even with the toughness 3, you really see just how durable this army can be.
Yep.
And frankly, with as cheap as all the models are in this army, losing models is never a big deal for them. It's
Not really.
Almost like playing orcs, where you can lose a bunch and still be totally fine.
They're pretty numerous
throughout a game.
Yep.
But we'll, as we walk into this, their Shield of Faith rule and whatnot, we'll cover that here in a minute. But for this order, this literally just saturates you in
this will saturate you in miracle dice. And the second half of it is whenever a model from the unit is destroyed, even if you bring it back later with like your Hospitaller, which is basically a apothecary.
It's an apothecary for Sisters.
Even if you bring them back if they're destroyed, basically if your unit takes casualties, for the rest of the game that unit gets +1 to hit.
Right.
Like that is really strong. That coupled with the fact that whenever a unit does get fully destroyed, you're getting miracle dice.
Yeah.
This is a really good order. Unfortunately, the problem is your units have to be taking damage and dying for it to take effect.
Yeah.
Otherwise, when they're fighting at full strength, untouched by the enemy, you get nothing out of this.
Yeah, I think this is an army you're going to want to put out in the open and let them die. And you kind of can just go crazy with them. You can just put them out in the open and go, head first into the opponent. And generally in 9th edition, that's not the best way to play in a lot of cases. With that said, this army can make up for it with all the miracle dice that they gain from losing, points or whatever, losing models. And I think that's probably fine for them. Especially, again, like we'll talk about Shield of Faith here, just how durable this army can be, even out in the open. So, so that covers more.
So that's a really good one. The only downside is, like I said, you have to die. We'll get into it later, but this order does have a really great character.
Yeah.
Who we'll talk about later when we get into data sheets.
Yeah, they got some characters and stratagems and stuff. And
it's specifically to this one, but it's.
So
She's
the
really
next
good.
one is going to be Valorous Heart.
Yes,
Now this one is my favorite one.
I would agree.
Valorous Heart. What it does is it gives this army every unit
Gets
in the
a
army
6-up, feel no pain.
Yep, gets a 6-up, feel no pain. So whenever they take a wound after they failed their save, they take a damage. They can roll a d6 on a 6. They ignore the wound. In addition, anytime somebody shoots at them, I believe it's just shoot, right? It doesn't work for. Maybe it's both. When resolving, so it's any attack. So
It's
resolving
any attack, any weapon,
including in melee.
Yep.
Whenever somebody makes an attack against them for any reason, anything with AP -1 on their weapon counts as AP 0.
Yeah, AP 0.
Now, this is already strong in by itself. There's a lot of weapons out there with AP -1.
Yep, bolt rifles.
And this just turns that off.
Yep.
And what's great about it is that can almost secure your sisters in cover a 2+ save all game long. This is partly what makes the army so durable. I mean, they're all decked out in power armor as it is, so they get their 3+ saves. You're going to be sitting in cover. Space
get
Marines.
a 2-up armor.
The only Space Marine that can match this is the Salamanders, because they have the AP 1 -0.
They have the same thing. Yep.
0. But in addition to this, and again, we'll talk about this character data sheet later on down the road, but there's a way to make it AP -2 equals 0. So 1 and 2, those two APs together equal 0. That's
huge.
amazing.
So now all of a sudden you're only being touched by AP 3.
Yeah.
And then at that point, you're kicking over into your invuln saves.
And again,
we'll get into invuln saves later.
Here in a little bit.
Yep.
But, so this is an incredibly powerful trait.
Yes.
It makes the army way more durable than it has any right to be.
Yes.
Especially when you're talking about an army that's only toughness 3, army-wide. And it's almost silly just how incredibly strong this is. But what's even more is, and again, we'll talk about this later on as we get into like the Warlord Traits, stratagems, and whatnot. But there's a lot of other things that tie into this that are good too.
Yeah.
Just by themselves, not just the trait itself. So the Order has a lot of great stuff going for it, and it makes this one of the better, in my opinion, one of the better.
I feel it's the best one out of the 6.
If not the best, it is one of the best. It's definitely in my top 2 for sure.
Yep.
And this is the only order I would play other than the Bloody Rose one, which is we're going to talk about next.
Yep.
Those are the two that generally are the powerhouse armies. And when you see these out there, they really make the army shine. When an opponent can't kill anything in your army, or in vice versa, the Bloody Rose version, where everything in your army kills everything of theirs.
Yeah.
It's quite frustrating, especially when you're talking about playing against a toughness 3 army, which generally should just get wiped off the board pretty quick. So it's a cute rule, and I think it's incredibly strong. But yeah, we're both in agreement. This is definitely probably, if not the best one of the 2 best. So when I play Sisters Battle, that's generally the order trait I run. And I've touched on Bloody Rose a few games, but it's primarily because of the fact that I'm running certain units. Yeah. If you're just running a generalized army, this is generally the one you're going to want to take.
Yeah,
If your army's kind of an all-around, or you want to stick with shooting mostly, this is the one that you want to stick with.
Yep. That's like, if you're ever in doubt, just run the Valorous Heart. Yeah. But going into Bloody Rose, the Bloody Rose is a really good one, but it's very generalized. It only works for your melee weapons and your pistols.
Yeah, it's very specific in what you can do with it, and you have to, it's designed to run certain types of units with. What's more is the fact that certain units are actually already strong in melee for this army, but when you start stacking the straight on top of it, it just puts them so far over the edge that it's almost embarrassing.
So what this trait does is gives you 1 extra AP on your melee and pistols.
Yep.
And then if you perform a charge, or heroically intervene, you get an extra attack.
Right.
The extra attack is always nice, especially on your already good melee units.
Yeah, this turns your Sisters of Battle into Blood Angels light, essentially.
The AP1, the additional AP1, in my mind, is largely useless, because the units that do get affected by this, because there's only like 2 or 3 that actually get to use this to its effect, already have like AP3 weapons. So you're taking AP3 to AP4, which generally drops them into their invuln anyway. at
Yeah.
AP3, so
I
it's
think
largely useless.
the units you're running this army for, this portion of it doesn't generally do a whole lot for. And again, for Pencha, we'll get into them.
Yep.
They're the big unit you're going to want to run with this trait, primarily for that extra attack. When you're just overloaded with attacks, it's ridiculous. But I think the thing I want to impress upon people is that the AP, any AP in the game is always a good thing. An AP reduction or whatever the case is. So an AP -1, I mean, you might not find a way to use it all the time, but there have been plenty of times where like my General Sisters units have been stuck in combat and they've been able to bully their way even through Space Marines.
With just their sidearms, yeah.
Well, not even the sidearms, just punching.
Oh, punching?
Running into combat.
Well, yeah, they get an extra attack. There's up to 2.
We'll get into missionaries too, but you know,
Yep.
with you stack this with a missionary, they're getting +2 to their attacks, and then you throw in, you know, the tail of the warrior, or whatever, something that gives them +1 strength.
Yep.
So now you got Sisters of Battle at weapon skill 4, hitting on strength 4, AP -1 with 3 to 4 attacks apiece. It makes them pretty lethal.
Yep.
Now, granted, I mean they're not Space Marines, but
No.
when you got almost twice the amount of sisters per Space Marine,
Pretty
generally,
much.
well, yeah, your average Space Marine is 18 points. Sisters of Battle is 9 or 10?
11.
11, okay.
They're 11 points.
I think they're 9, but plus the Molter, so that's what makes them.
No, they're 11 because of
They-
9th edition.
Yeah,
They used to be 9.
so they just merged them. So
Yep.
yeah, but yeah, so 11 points now. You're almost getting 2 sisters per Space Marine.
Yep.
And you're getting at least 2 more attacks minimum than a Space Marine would.
Yeah.
Because of just the number of models per point cost. So, like I said, this is not. I mean, I wouldn't recommend running going into a dogfight head first.
No.
With 10-man unit, 15-man unit of Sisters of Battle. With that said, if they need to, they can do it. And
They can do it, yeah.
bully their way out of combat if they need to as well.
Yep.
So you got enough attacks, you got enough. That AP really makes a big dent when you throw in 30, 40 attacks.
Yeah, I do like it on the Seraphim who are carrying dual pistols.
Yeah.
So that's nice.
Well,
AP1 pistols.
And another thing, yeah, that's the second part of this I wanted to talk about too, is that Sisters love their pistols in this army. They run a lot of them. You have the option to take a lot of combis and stuff like that on your superiors and whatnot. But if you have the option to take the pistol is pretty awesome. And when you're running around with AP -4 plasma or, I mean, Infernos are one thing, but
Yep.
AP -4 plasma, but even your bolt pistols at AP -1,
Yep.
they can stack
They
up
can
after
do
a
some
while.
damage.
So, like I said, Sisters do love their pistols, and that extra AP bonus can really make a difference.
Yep.
So,
So this is a good one. It's just very generalized. Now, Sisters have plenty of good melee capabilities. They're not like Tau where they have to stay away from it. But
Yeah.
this one, if you're building it this way, you're going to be a little front-ended into going into melee.
yeah, there are certain units this army really wants to run with, and if you're not running those, you're almost better off just taking a different order.
Yep.
It doesn't necessarily mean you have to. I mean, frankly, I'd be afraid of running into a 10-man unit of Sisters or 15-man unit of Sisters that have AP -1 in strength for multiple attacks apiece, even with my durable Space Marines and other units like that. But that's, neither here nor there. So, Ebon Chalice is the next one we're going to
The Ebon Chalice one is very questionable in my opinion. So it gives, whenever you lose a wound to a mortal wound, wherever you suffer a mortal wound, you get a 5+ to ignore it. So it's a lot like the Zarkan Dynasty
it's the
for
Black
Necrons.
Templar, Zarkan Dynasty trait, yeah.
In addition,
Which actually, I think that 5 Feel No Pain for versus Mortals is actually pretty good. It just doesn't show up in every game.
and the other half of this is whenever you use an Act of Faith or Miracle Dice, essentially, you can expend a Miracle Dice to make the dice that you used a 6.
Right.
So you can basically use 2 Miracle Dice to make one die a 6.
Yeah. So what this is designed to do, this is designed for your Melta-Guns. Pretty much. I mean, there's probably other ways to use it too, but in my opinion, I think this is best utilized with Melta-Guns. So you can expend an extra Miracle Dice, which like I said, you're probably going to be loaded up on Miracle Dice throughout the game.
Yeah,
So
odds are you're probably going to have like a 5 or 6 floating around anyway.
Yeah. So what's nice about this is that if that Melta punches through and you just happen to need a 6 for some reason, if that 6, will lock down the kill or whatever without having to roll for it, you just replace that, whatever, the opportunity to roll a die with a low miracle dice and then an automatic 6. So I think it's a good one. I just think it's a little situational.
Yeah.
And then the 5-up Feel No Pain against Mortal Wounds, I think, is also very situational as well. I mean, there's been a lot of games where I played with my Templar, and I absolutely love having that 5-up Feel No Pain. But with that said, again, it's not going to happen in every game.
Yeah, there are some armies that just don't even do mortal wounds, like Tau. Now almost every army's got vehicles that explode.
And that's, I think Sisters use a lot of
or
vehicles. So this
like
is
a relic or something, they'll do mortal
this
wounds.
trait
But
would be phenomenal if you're running like a lot of transports, a lot of like immolators, rhinos, exorcists, stuff like that. Even I think penitent engines and whatnot, when they die, they deal mortal wounds.
It just feels very situational.
situational.
Now, when you do come against get like Grey Knights or Thousand Suns, that's going to be phenomenal because them being able to just go around your armor and your invuln with mortal wounds is a real weakness. And
the army by itself can
this will help you survive
already deny psychic powers, but now you're not not only are you denying psychic powers, you're also denying mortal wounds that are dealt to you. It just turns off those smites, so it's pretty solid. Again, it's situational, but there are certain games that this can be phenomenal in. So
what I will say about it is it does have a very good Warlord trait, which we'll get into later.
Yeah.
So that might lean you into taking this based on what the Warlord trait is.
This isn't overly one of my favorite ones in terms of gameplay, but it's got some bite to it in the right situations. So it is quite an interesting one to take. And then again, generally, when you run into a problem with like an order trait or a tenet or something like that, chapter tactic, where it's more on the weaker side, when you go and look at like the Warlord traits, the Relics,
they might be the determining factor.
That are specific for the army, they generally tend to be more powerful. So I think with this one actually not being bad, even though it's not one of the best ones, I think you can turn around and say it almost kind of evens out. But again, we'll get into that as we get through the rest of them. So, Argent Shroud is probably my third favorite of them.
Really?
I really like this.
I feel this one is garbage.
So when the unit advances, it can fire ranged weapons if it had moved without advancing. So basically, what this is great for is for which are probably the most powerful unit in the army right now, other than the Repentia. Is the what are they called? The Retributors. The heavy weapon.
Oh yeah.
So what these are amazing for is you have your melta guns, which are they're not just melta guns; they're multi-meltas. So they're heavy weapons. Now they're mobile heavy weapons that fire very very long ranges, and in addition to that, multi-meltas are just one of the weapons. The heavy bolters another thing too. When your infantry can move and fire all of its heavy weapons at full power all game long and advance, you have a very mobile army that can really lay down a lot of firepower and never suffer from problems.
The problem I have with it is it's only when you advance, which you might not always be doing. It's only you have to have a ranged weapon. So like if your melee units get nothing from this this order.
This isn't going to benefit.
And then all it does is take away the -1. Like, you're not gaining a buff out of this. You're just not suffering a penalty.
Right. And Ballistic
This feels really bad to me.
Ballistic Skill 4 isn't awful, per se. I don't know. I think, again, this is one of those ones where if you look at the stratagems of Warlord Traits, Relics, even if you don't like the trait itself, it kind of turns around. The stratagem itself is pretty awesome, and we'll get to that later. But
yeah, we'll get into those later, but even their strats and their Warlord Traits, I don't think are saving this order at all. In my opinion, you should avoid this at all costs. But Rick seems to like it.
No, I think it's because of the experience that I've played with them. If you're running, I think it's, again, specific units you're running that are really going to benefit from this. Your regular sister squads can take heavy weapons. Your Retributors can take they're loaded to the teeth with heavy weapons. So if you're not running a lot of vehicles and you're running a lot of infantry and you want to just keep them mobile all game long, this is a good way to do it. I think the -1 to hit isn't necessarily the worst thing in the world, especially when you got reroll 1s from your canoness all the time.
Yeah.
With that said, keeping the army fully accurate all game long. I mean, it's still pretty good. It's one of those things where I think, again, it's somewhat situational. But the fact is a blanket covers enough of the army where I think that it can be, you can find a reason to take it, especially over some of the other ones in here. Am I going to take it over Valorous Heart? Probably not in most cases. But that said, you know, like I said, you know, when you tie in a combination with the different things that the army, this particular order can do, they do tend to stack up. And again, we'll get to that further down the road. But by itself, it's probably not the strongest trait, and I would definitely agree with that. But overall, I think, again, it's my third favorite one just because of the fact that Retributors tend to be so popular right now. And having super accurate multi-meltas that are fast is quite an interesting thing. Primarily because of the fact that you need line of sight all the time, so you're constantly shifting around. Another thing that's interesting too is that multi-meltas, even though they, you know, the sisters can get pretty long range ones, with a stratagem, they still need to kind of get up close to that half range in order to be able to utilize the new melter rule.
The new melter, yep.
So this allows them to do that. They can constantly be on the move, get up real close, real quick, and never have to worry about that penalty. So, I mean, yeah, this is one of those things where you just kind of got to choose whether or not you like it. In my case, I do. In Mars' cases, he doesn't, and that's fine. You know, that's kind of how the game works. And I think that's partly why these orders are so damn good, because you have so many options to choose from, and you can solidify and play the army the way you want to play it. So,
yeah, I think that's a good reason why we're doing these videos, and we got two people here, and we got chat too, so everyone can get their comments in.
Yeah.
Like, I'm on one side of the fence, Rick's on another. You know,
you can definitely see there's everybody, you know, everybody has their opinion on this. Everything in the book people are going to have opinions on, and that's partially why we want to do this, just so people can get an idea of kind of what they like, and you know, see things from different points of view. I think is important, because there are some people that are set in their mind on, well, you know, this is bad for this reason. Well, you know, maybe one of our differing opinions will give you you know, enough motivation to try and at least give it a shot. And then see how you like it. If you like it, great. If not, then you know.
And that's why we really try and make recommendations on this show and not tell you what you should and shouldn't be playing.
Well, worst case scenario, we
give you
hours of your time.
Yeah.
So that's what it comes down to.
Yep.
But I mean, like I said, with the way this is set up, I think the orders are good enough to where you can kind of mix and match, try a few games with each different order trait. And then, you know, between that, the Warlord Traits, stratagems, and relics, you can kind of find out really what you like. And I think every one of them, the army by itself without the Warlord order traits are already pretty good. So I think no matter what, you're safe playing whatever you want. It's just that certain ones do shine a little better than others. And you'll kind of see that as you play more and more. So the last one here is the Sacred Rose.
Last one is the Sacred Rose. Now, I used to really like this one, because I felt it was the best one in 8th, because you get so much out of it. So keep in mind, this is the one for 8th. This is what this book was made for. It's 8th edition. So do you want me to stop for a sec?
We're talking, but the stream froze for some reason.
Okay. So when a morale test is taken for a unit, they can only ever lose one model. So in 8th edition, that was good. In addition, whenever you perform an act of faith for a unit with this conviction, you can roll a d6, and on a 5+, you gain a miracle dice.
Yeah, that's cool.
So 1 in every 3 dice that you spend, you just get back. You just have 25% more miracle dice, essentially.
Yeah.
And then finally, because it keeps going, when you resolve an Overwatch for attacks from models with this conviction, you hit on a 5 or 6. So you get the Tau Sept Tenet, but for your sisters. So it does so much. That's why I really loved it in 8th edition. I thought it was the best. It just is such a good order for 8th edition. Now the problem is we switched over into 9th edition. So now when you Overwatch, unlike Tau, you have to pay CP to even do that. So that's a huge flaw for that right there. In addition, with the morale test, you only ever lose one model right now anyway. Well, there's attrition tests too, which I believe will factor differently for this. I'm not. It's worded a little funny because it's worded for 8th edition, so I don't know how it's going to change or be fixed,
Yeah, so
or even functions right now.
Nothing from this trait is broken to where it's unusable.
No.
I think it's interesting because the first half of it doesn't really work. The fact that you don't really need to worry about morale tests, whether or not you can lose an extra one. It doesn't really do anything for the army, and an army that doesn't already lose much from leadership in the first place.
Nope.
Whenever they fail morale. Another thing too is I think the second half of it, or I should say the third half of it.
Yeah.
The 5 and a 6 for Overwatch, again, like Mars said, was great back in 8th edition. Now the problem is that you can only do it with one unit.
Yeah.
So now you're only benefiting from it
On one unit.
Once on one unit.
And once per battle round.
If you spend the command points to do so.
Yep.
Per battle round, and it's a problem. That's not a good thing. It can be clutch in certain scenarios.
Yeah.
Like if you get a unit that's being charged and they're like Retributors or something, or an Exorcist, something with a lot of firepower. You can turn that up to a 5 and a 6 to hit in Overwatch and shred an opponent just like Tau do in Overwatch.
Yeah.
But with that said, there's not enough Overwatch nowadays to make it worth really running this trait for it. Just to take a trait and basically because you got all these other options of great traits to take from, and then when you compare it to this, it's just kind of hard to justify that. The last part of it, I think, is kind of, or I should say the second part of it is pretty interesting.
So that's still very relevant.
When you spend a miracle dice on a 5+, you get to roll a d6. On a 5+, you gain another miracle dice. So basically, when you burn your miracle dice, you can get miracle dice back.
Yep.
I think that's really interesting, and because of the fact that this is a 3-part order trait,
Yep.
I think it's not awful. It's just that the last portion of it
fallen a lot.
has really lost a lot of its power in the transition to 9th edition, and frankly, I don't think the middle portion of it justifies really taking it. Especially when you got other
good,
ones.
but
Well, then you got like I said, Martyr Lady. You're going to be getting extra dice from that most
yeah,
of the game.
yeah. Your units die, and you get miracle dice.
If you
from
need
that.
the miracle dice, you don't really need to run Sacred Rose because you're just going to get it from Martyr Lady. And in this case, Martyr Lady, top to bottom, that trait is good.
I mean, you lose a character, and you get 2 just from that.
Right. So there's so many ways to gain that miracle dice off of that trait. That Sacred Rose is just kind of hard to be like, okay, well, I'm going to bite the bullet, lose the benefits from the first and third portion of it, because I might never use those in a game, or they'll just be situational. So I frankly think it's not the worst trait, but I shouldn't say worst. It's in my opinion the worst Sisters of Battle order. It's not the worst trait I've seen though. I've seen so many other chapter tactics and stuff like that which are far worse than this. So it can at least be utilized. So this,
you could still utilize that middle one.
Some things in the game. So I'm not complaining about it. But then again, when you go and look at like some of the stratagems, Warlord Traits, and Relics that this particular order has, they don't quite justify taking this trait for it. So yeah, I think that covers the orders, right?
Yep. So Sacred Rose, it was really powerful in 8th. It just did not transition very well at all into 9th.
Yeah.
And it's very questionable now.
I mean, it doesn't mean you can't run it. Just be cautious when you run it and don't expect for it to outperform in every game. So before we move into anything else, what I do want to talk about is Shield of Faith. So that's actually, was it?
So that's one of the.
So Strength of Faith
So
is the
that's
first
a special ability that a lot of units in your army are going to have. Pretty much
anything with the Sororitas keyword.
Yeah.
has it.
Yep. So that's basically any sister wearing power armor is going to have that.
The tanks get it too.
Yeah, the tanks get. Well, they're piloted by sisters who have power armor.
Yeah.
Yep.
So literally everything in your army with this Adepta Sororitas keyword. Now, granted, there are a few in the codex that are not Adepta Sororitas, like the Ministorum priests and your Flagellants and the Penitent engines, stuff like that. They do not get the Shield of Faith saves.
Yeah.
Now, the Shield of Faith is actually really interesting because the Shield of Faith allows you to deny psychic power on a single D6.
Yes.
So that's pretty good. And then, in addition, the other half of it is that you get a 6-up invulnerable save on the
Yes.
units. So now this actually, again, we'll get further down the road and talk about more about how you can make this better. But the 6-up invulnerable save already is pretty good. But then when you talk about the fact that you can make it, I think it goes up to a maximum of a 4.
Yes, you can modify this.
There are a couple units that used to be able to push it up to a 3-up, but with the restructuring of the book when the codex came out, the max you can get it to is a 4+. It is a very good ability.
Oh yeah.
And in and by itself, it's already kind of interesting. The fact that you don't get to deny the witch on 2d6 is a little bit of a letdown, especially when you consider the army doesn't have any psychic powers.
Yeah, but it reins it in because it's every unit that has this.
Right.
So you're going to have dozens of deny attempts.
That's
Now it's
exactly
only a 1d6, and you can only deny each power once.
Yeah.
But
And then
you're going to have plenty of
here's
attempts.
partly why we're talking about this is because we're moving right from Shield of Faith into Sacred Rites.
Yep.
Shield of Faith by itself is pretty good, but now we're adding in Sacred Rites, which can turn up the heat on this ability a little bit, especially the psychic portion of it. So what you do, you get to choose 2, right? You get to choose 1, or you get to randomly roll for 2.
No, I think you only ever choose one.
Yeah,
Or no, you can randomly choose
generate
2. Yep.
Yep, so you get a Sacred Rite, and you get to pick one. As long as your army is all Adeptus Sororitas or Adeptus Ministorum.
If you're Battleforged.
They've got to have that keyword. So as long as the army matches that description, you're going to get a Sacred Rite that you get to pick from on a list of 6 different Sacred Rites, or you get to randomly roll for 2. And a lot of times people will just pick the 1 because they want their army to be specific.
Very specific, yep.
Yeah, but in certain cases where it doesn't really make a whole lot of a difference to you, you can roll for 2. And frankly, if you get the 2 you want, you're sitting in a really good position when you start the game, whether or not you go first. So.
And with that being said, you don't have to pick Sacred Rites until right before the first battle round.
Exactly.
So I believe right before you figure out who goes first, you can wait until the last second. So you can see how what your opponent has, how they deployed, everything like that, before you even decide what your Sacred Rites need to be.
Yeah, and these Sacred Rites allow you to tailor your list. It's the last bit of tailoring you get in order to make your list fight well against your opponent's list.
Yep.
So whatever they bring, you can pick the Sacred Rite you need to match what they're bringing, to help give you that little bit of an edge that they otherwise wouldn't get.
Yep.
So all of them I think are okay. There's a couple of them in here that are pretty good. I don't think any of them are outstanding, but the fact that they're such a last minute, you get to tailor them.
Tailoring, yep.
They don't have to be incredibly powerful. And just that little bit of an edge might be enough to make the difference. So the very first one is Hand of the Emperor. So what this does is when a unit with a Sacred Rite advances, add 1 to the advance roll, and when you make a charge roll for the unit from the Sacred Rite, add 1 to the result.
Yeah.
This is never a bad thing. +1 to advance, +1 to charge is always pretty good in the game. And this is super good on Bloody Rose because it allows you to just bolt up the board, get your units into combat.
It really helps with consistency.
But this is definitely one that's designed for more melee purposes. It's not super great for shooting, unless for some reason you need that extra advance for moving to objectives or whatever the case is. So let's see, we got a couple comments here. So Nicole, that'd be your wife. She said, now I'm considering running under Martyr instead. I usually use Sacred Rose. I've only ever picked 1. So she's talking about, she's got 2 comments in here. The first one was about changing her order. The other one was about picking her Sacred Rites. So just to kind of comment on that.
Yeah, like I said, in 8th edition, which wasn't that long ago, Sacred Rose was the best one, but since
very good.
we switched over to 9th edition, it makes it very questionable.
It's, again, like I said, it's not one of those things. If you like Sacred Rose, take it by all means. There's nothing wrong with
that
it.
middle one's still really good.
It's just
like I said, that's 25% more miracle dice.
It's just that you just don't quite get enough from that one when you compare it to the other ones in terms of what 9th edition does for the game. So, if you're losing out a little bit on Sacred Rose as opposed to the other ones, big deal. Because frankly, the army is still good by itself, even
Oh, yeah.
without the order traits.
Oh,
So
yeah.
you're fine to run whatever you want. It's just that if you really want to be competitive, or you really want that extra edge, or you really want your army to be super durable or super fighty, Sacred Rose is not the best one to take. But if you want your army, to stick with being fluffy and to be fun, there's nothing wrong with Sacred Rose at all. Nothing at all. So
Yeah, it might come down to like Warlord Traits and strats.
yep. And then just a comment on the Sacred Rites comment. Yeah, generally people pick one. Picking one is the way to go, because more often than not, you're going to end up with
Like 2 that you don't really want.
Yeah, and it's kind of tricky because there are certain units, like Sacred Rites by themselves, if you're just picking the one, you're going to be able to tailor that extra little edge
Yeah,
that you
it's
need.
all about tailoring.
With that said, there is a way to get your Sacred Rites. If you don't like what you randomly rolled, you can change your Sacred Rite out, and that's a stratagem.
Yeah, there's a stratagem later.
So if for some reason you roll 2 and you don't happen to like one of them, you can roll and change out your roll with a different one. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should, but it gives you a little bit more leeway for the roll.
That strat is called Battle Rights, and you're spending 1 CP to change your selected rights to a different one.
Correct.
And it's random.
Yeah, it's still random.
I think this thing is worthless. Like, you already get to wait until the almost very last second to pick what your Sacred Right is, and then you have this strat which you use after that point to randomly change it to something that might not even be better.
That's true.
I'm like, why are you wasting the CP? Why is this a stratagem?
So here's my thinking here, and we'll go over the rest of the Sacred Rites here. And this
if it wasn't random, that'd be good. But it's random.
So the way I look at this is, if for some reason I'm rolling the random and I'm playing against an opponent who doesn't have any psychers, this would actually be very good if you end up rolling the Aegis of the Emperor, which is the 3rd one on the chart. And what that does is it gives you +3 to your Deny the Witch. So when you're rolling to deny a power. Now, you're not going to use Deny the Witch at all in the game when an opponent does not have a psyker.
No.
So if you happen to roll randomly and you land on this Aegis of the Emperor, having that 1 CP stratagem to re-roll and get a different trait, I mean, yeah, granted you might ended up back on the same one again.
Oh, well, Battle Rights does get around that. If you roll the same one, you get to roll again.
I think you get to re-roll.
So
frankly, I think
in that situation, yes.
I think you're okay to it's one of those things where if you're stuck in a bad spot with the Sacred Rites, you can change it out. I wouldn't call it worthless. I think there are problems with using it, especially when you're burning command points that you...
Yeah, otherwise
you'd almost be better off just keeping your command points because they can be utilized better than the Sacred Rites in the game.
Yep.
But I think an argument can be made for this stratagem if for some reason you're stuck in a position where you really just don't want it.
Yeah. Like when you're rolling 2 random ones, yeah.
And again, it comes down to how you weigh the Sacred Rites. In terms of what they do for the army, I don't think anything is overpowered in terms of the strength of them. I don't think anything... None of them are like trash tier. None of them are god tier, so they're kind of like... They're pretty decent buffs, but they're nothing super strong to the point where
I'd put them on par with like Space Marine Doctrines.
Yeah. I think that's partly why people just pick... they just pick one, because you just get away with picking one and it's going to be useful for you.
Yep.
Whereas if you roll 2, you're probably going to get one you like, and there's a chance you might get one that you don't like. And that would be when you would spend the CP to change out to a different one.
Yeah, I personally say don't take the risk on rolling 2 randomly because this is a tailoring mechanic. You want to be able to use this to counter what your opponent is doing. And when you do that randomly, it's not always going to come out heads for you.
I think the way I look at it is in competitive play, I would never roll randomly. I would choose the one I wanted. So if I take this to a tournament, I'm not rolling 2 random Sacred Rites. With that said, if I'm playing a game where it's just casual or fluffy or something along those lines, I don't see any reason why you couldn't just randomly roll for 2, because is it really necessary to have that edge over your opponent when an army like this is already really good? Probably not in most cases. So, like I said, arguments can be made on both sides, and I think it comes down to really how you want to play. But overall, I think the Sacred Rites are pretty good. So the second one here on the list is Spirit of the Martyr.
Yep, I believe that's one of the better ones.
So when a model with this Sacred Rites destroyed, roll a d6 before removing the model. On a 5+, it can shoot with one of its range weapons as if it was a shooting phase, or make an attack with one of its melee weapons as if it was the fight phase. So what this does is it allows
basically gives you the Ancient's Banner.
It's the Ancient's Banner ability, and it's actually better because it's not a -1.
Nope.
The Ancients is a -1.
You just get to shoot.
So they get to shoot on a ballistic of 4, where these sisters get to shoot on a ballistic of 3.
And it's also not restricted to like infantry or anything like that. So when your exorcist dies on a 5+, it gets to shoot.
It's any Sororitas or Ministorum model that's
cool.
That's put into this list. So, I mean, granted, if you took an Inquisitor, the Inquisitor wouldn't get it. There's some other units that may not, assassins and stuff, don't get it. But with that said, yeah, the whole army really gets this, and it covers. It's a blanket coverage enough to where I think it's a very solid one, and you can never argue with getting more shots, especially when they're like Meltas and stuff like that. And this army is just packed to the teeth.
33% more shots for every model that dies.
Well, right, yeah. So like I said, this ability, this army's already packed to the teeth with really nasty weapons already.
Yeah.
So when these weapons get to fire more, just because the model dies, it makes them that much more impactful throughout a game. And this army, even though it's durable in terms of its survivability, toughness 3, you're still going to lose models throughout a game. So if half of those models are still firing when they're dying, or I guess a third of these models are firing when they're dying, that's still a pretty hefty chunk of firepower you're getting out every turn that you otherwise wouldn't. So.
And I also like the combination with this with the Bloody Rose order, because when you lose a model, you're getting that +1 to hit because you're Bloody Rose. And then on a 5+, you get to shoot at +1 to hit.
Yeah.
So because you killed one of my guys, I get to attack you with more accurate attacks.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely a good one, and I think it's probably one of the better on this list. What's interesting is
within top 2 for me, if not the best.
Yeah. So what's weird, you go back and look at Space Marines, and they got to pay for their Ancients. This comes free with the army. It's just it's a built-in.
Just built in.
So. I mean, you still have to choose it from a list of 6 other ones, or 5 other ones. But with that said, I mean, it's still worth taking in most cases. And because of the fact that it covers the entire army, it's
it works
pretty
in
impressive.
shooting and melee.
It's pretty impressive. So, Aegis of the Emperor, that's the 3rd one on the list, and that's the one that gives you the 3 to your Deny the Witch tests.
Yeah, so...
this allows you to deny psychic powers much more...
much more effective. +3 to your tests.
Up to a 9. Essentially.
So that's anywhere. So you only get your 1d6 on your Deny the Witch attempts.
Yeah.
But this will make it anywhere between a 4 and a 9.
Yeah. Well, and what's more is you can use Miracle Dice to deny as well.
Oh yeah, you could just
because if you have a 6 and you
could just make it a 6. You could
just
make it a 9.
6. So it makes it if you really want to deny a power bad enough, you can do it. And this actually boosts that to where it's not just smites, it's not just the little.
It's not just the little
powers.
piddly powers.
These are even the more powerful powers. Even all the way up to like Vortex of Doom and I don't remember what the one that Magnus casts on an 8 or whatever. So all those really powerful, warp charge 8 powers and stuff, you can do those too. So.
Yep, you can stop those.
Yeah.
Now that's the only real thing to say about this is if you're not fighting against Psychers, this one has no use.
Yeah.
So now, fortunately, it's a Sacred Right, so you can see who you're fighting and even how they deploy before you pick.
This one. You're never.
You don't have to pick it.
Yeah. So. Unless you're rolling randomly, you're never going to be stuck with this one if you don't want it, which is pretty cool. So, Divine Guidance is the next one. And whenever you resolve an attack with a ranged weapon made by a model with a Sacred Right, an unmodified wound roll of a 6 is improved by 1. So basically, this adds AP -1 on 6s for whenever you're shooting. So, pick your unit, make your shots, and that little extra 6 will add an AP to your shots. I think it's pretty good.
This is the one I really like. It only works for your ranged weapons, so that's probably the only bad thing I want to say about it. But you're just having rending 6s is always good. Like we talked about, bolt pistols will now be, if you roll a 6 to wound, you get an extra AP.
Yeah. Well, this is coming from an army that just loves its ranged weapons, and it's got so many shots. This army is just saturated in shots because every single model comes with multiple weapons. You get a pistol or you get a bolter, and on every model except for the ones that have better weapons.
Well,
with the exception of Repentia.
The army's pretty pretty numerically large too. I mean, sisters are only 11 points.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing is you're gonna have so many bodies on the table.
Yep.
And every one of them is gonna have multiple weapons. So the fact that this affects all of those ranged weapons at any given point in time, it really can add up over a game. It's not like the Tau one where the Tau one's very situational. Pick a unit.
Yeah, pick a
on
unit, has to be in
sixes,
line of sight.
But unfortunately
then roll
for
a six,
Tau,
yeah.
you know, that's the best thing they have. They don't have anything else to benefit from, so you're almost forced to take that. Whereas this one, this just covers everything.
Every unit has it.
Everything.
Yep,
So it's huge. It's a good one. So yeah, Divine Guidance I think is definitely one of the better ones in this list as well. The Passion is the next one. So when you resolve an attack with a melee weapon, an unmodified score of a 6 gives you an extra hit. So this is good for units like Repentia.
Yeah.
Even regular Sisters of Battle when you throw in a Minotaur Priest in there. Your characters. Those extra. Anytime you roll a 6, getting those extra hits is awesome.
Now it'll work for any
It's Death
unit.
of the False Emperor.
It is. It's Death of the False Emperor for the Imperium.
Yeah. Well,
against
sisters.
anyone. Now, it works on anyone, so even your sisters can punch and get effect out of this.
Yeah.
But you're getting 2 hits at strength 3 instead of 1. Is that really great? I mean, it's meant for your dedicated melee units, like your Repentia or your
yeah, this is really designed for those
characters.
Very specific melee-based units. Again, like I said, in my experience, I really love to have this when I'm rolling, you know, big sister squads with a Minotaur and Priest following behind them, and then Bloody Rose, where they get that extra attack. You get the +1 to strength from the banner.
I was gonna say,
And then you throw in, so they're strength 4, AP -1 with three attacks apiece on the charge. And now all of a sudden, every 6 they rolled a hit. I mean, they stack up on
because it stacks with Bloody Rose. So like that extra attack from Bloody Rose, and then from the preacher or whatever that gives them more attacks.
Yeah.
Those are more chances for you to generate 6s, which give you even more attacks.
Yeah. So the stacking actually plays. They all play really well together, and that's kind of what this trait is designed for. So if you really want a melee-based army, this is the way to go. And generally, if you're running Repentia and other units that are designed for melee, you're running Bloody Rose and you're running the Preacher and all that anyway.
Yep.
So this just
this is just icing on the top of that cake. Yep.
Yeah, and like I said, none of these are like super amazing, but they're there and they do play a role throughout the game. So they're all pretty good.
The last one I feel is the worst. When you take a morale test for a unit with this Sacred, you can reroll the die.
Yeah, it's probably my least favorite on this list.
Why do I need this? Especially over the other ones?
Well, so the thing is like, how often are you going to fail a morale test in the game?
Not often.
Especially
with Miracle Dice.
Sisters of Battle never really need to fail morale if they don't want to. This would only come in handy if, you know, for some reason...
It's not even guaranteed. It's just a reroll.
Well, right, and this would come into play if like you don't have your characters left, if you don't, if you're not playing in order that will benefit, like if you don't have the CP for the stratagem to auto pass. I think there's actually another stratagem here in the book that lets the sisters unit auto pass as well, so they can do it twice.
Basically,
So
we'll get into that, but there's one that basically, if you have a character, it only works with a character, but if you have a character nearby, they basically auto pass.
Right. So the army doesn't suffer from morale a whole lot anyway, but if you're playing an opponent who's just stacking morale debuffs and stuff on you all game long, I guess you could find a use for this, but again, this is also situational, so yeah, I would agree this is my least favorite on the list. It's not that it's bad, but it's just that there are better ones that you would almost always take over this.
Yep.
So, yeah, that's just my opinion. I'm sure Mars agrees here. So that kind of covers the Sacred Rites.
Yep.
The last thing on this page that we want to cover is the Zealot rule.
Yeah. So a few units have Zealot.
Quite a few of them. Yeah, quite a few of them have them. Most of them are the Minotaurium units.
Yep.
But I think even the Repentia get this too, don't they?
Yeah, the Repentia get it, I'm pretty sure.
So Zealot allows them to reroll hit rolls in the charge.
Yep.
As long as they made a charge, were charged, or performed a heroic intervention this turn.
Repentia have Zealot.
So obviously this is better on Repentia than pretty much everything else in the army. But with that said, you know, the Zealot rule in general is just a good one.
Yeah.
Being able to reroll all your hits on a charge.
Just for charging.
Or when you get charged. That's always a good thing. So the fact that it's kind of just free and built into the units is pretty awesome. So definitely a good one. Can't argue with that. So.
All right.
Is there anything else we want to get into? Well, I suppose we can go over stratagems and Warlord Traits and Relics.
Yeah, let's go over to Warlord Traits.
Okay.
Fast.
Yeah, there's a few in here.
Little goofy in here.
There you go. Warlord Traits.
Warlord Traits. Yep.
So we got quite a few in this list, and I think
Yeah.
really all of them are fighting for, well, maybe not all of them, but most of them are fighting for a spot in your army.
They're all pretty decent.
Yeah.
For me, the big winners are the Indomitable Belief and the Beacon of Faith.
Yeah.
So, Indomitable Belief, the invulnerable saves of friendly infantry models. What's the range on it? Within 6, gain +1 to their invulnerable save to a maximum of 4+.
This is a
Now,
pseudo-
generally, this is going to bring them up to a 5-up invuln, essentially doubling their invuln
Yeah.
save.
This is a pseudo
Just
aura.
for a Warlord trait.
This is a pseudo aura for your characters that allows you to make your army have a built-in 5-up invuln save. It turns that Shield of Faith from a 6 to a 5, which can further again be increased again by having like Celestine in your list among other
Yep.
things. So.
There's a couple ways.
Yeah, so there's a few ways to do it, and the fact that you can get your army to an army-wide 4-up invuln within a bubble is incredible, to
Yep.
say the least. Especially when you're talking about a toughness 3 army that
Yeah.
would drop like flies if it wasn't for the fact that they didn't have this rule. And then when you build it in with like, not Argent Shroud. What's the other one? Valorous Heart.
Valorous Heart,
That's what
yeah.
I'm thinking. So when you build it in with Valorous Heart, this just stacks to make the army
So
ridiculously hard to kill.
because they need to AP3 just to get through your armor to even start affecting it,
Yeah.
and then at that point they're going to drop you down to a 5-up invuln.
Wow.
So now it's like
So here's the way I look at this.
I'm trying to kill an 11-point model, and you're just getting saves
You have
all the time.
You have a monstrous amount of bodies on the board that, for the most part, will have a 2-up base save.
In cover, yeah.
They're going to be in cover most of the time.
Yep.
Or a -1 to hit. So either
Yep.
a -1 to hit and a 3-up, or a 2-up base save. And then AP -1 and 2 equals 0.
Provided they're next to a character.
And then
Yep.
in addition to that, well, because you generally run this Warlord trait on your Magnifier.
Oh yeah, and your magic. The
And again,
character who does that,
we'll
you
get
give this
into
to
that
him.
further.
Yep.
But so now you got an army-wide 2-up with or with AP -2 equals 0, or a 3-up with a -1 to hit with AP -2 equals 0,
Yep.
with a 4-up invulnerable save army-wide.
Yep.
That can deny psychic powers, and on top of that gets a 6-up feeling of pain. That is incredibly difficult to kill. And
So you need AP3
it's
to affect the
obnoxious.
armor, and then they still get a 5-up, and then if they fail that, they get a 6-up to stop it.
yeah. So
And if they fail all that, you killed an 11-point model.
right.
It's like, oh god.
Yeah, you spend a lot of time shooting at stuff you really don't want to shoot at, and screens in this army are built so incredibly durable. Honestly, I think this is probably the best screening army in the game, because your sister's troops are objective secured, even when they're
Yep,
screening,
they're troops.
and you don't care if they die. Big deal, whatever, let them go.
They're cheap enough.
Your 11-point model doesn't matter at all. It won't make an impact on the game other than to stop your opponent from getting to you, which I think is phenomenal. And they come with a bolter, so you can't really argue with their power.
Yep.
So, and that's the weakest model you get, you know?
Yeah, that's
So-
your weakest model. That's your basic grunt.
Right. So, so Indomitable Belief definitely is the best one on this list.
Yep.
I think we're both in agreement on that.
Now, it only affects infantry, so if you're running like a lot of vehicles, you might shy away from
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah.
In that case, you might be very tempted by Beacon of Faith. So at the start of your turn, if your warlord is on the battlefield, you gain a miracle die.
Yeah.
Real simple and easy.
Yeah.
As long as your warlord's alive throughout the game, you'll get 5 miracle dice.
Well, and that's the thing
Just for a warlord
'cause you're already getting 1 per turn anyway, so now you get another
You get
one.
2. You get 2 at the start of your turn.
Yeah. So you're getting 2 per minimum, at minimum per battle round, and that's not in addition to all the other ways to get it as well. So
It's real good because it's just so universal, because miracle dice are so universal.
yeah, and if you're playing any of the name characters, there's a lot of ways to get even more. So now this is Celestine's. When we get to Celestine's chart, this is her Warlord trait.
Yep.
She comes standard with this, and most people like to run Celestine. I guess if you don't really want to run her, that's up to you, I guess.
Well, you also don't have to make her a warlord, do you?
No, you don't. Not at all. But you can get 2 Warlord traits in this army, which is why it's so cool. So you're able to get a lot of miracle dice just by taking her and then just running her as the Warlord, or you can just take like a Canoness and run this on a Canoness as well. So it's definitely a good trait, and it's usually my second option. If I'm taking a melee like a Canoness or something, I may generally shy away from this one. But first and foremost, Indomitable Belief is going to be the one I take every single game. Primarily because that 4-up invuln just makes a huge difference as opposed to the 5-up invuln.
Yeah. Well, like we said, just taking it from a 6-up invuln to a 5-up, it doubles your invuln save.
Yeah, the impact is massive for Indomitable Belief. Now, Beacon of Faith, it's one of those things where it does make an impact on the game, having those extra miracle dice. It's always a good thing.
Always a good thing.
But there are reasons why you may not take this every game. One, it comes down to whether or not you want to spend the command point for it, or two, like in my case, if I want to take a melee character, I'm going to take a melee Warlord trait. So
yeah, and a lot of these other Warlord traits generally kind of do that. They either make your character more fighty or tougher.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of them actually isn't here for like leadership purposes or psychic tests. Okay, so Pure Will, that's number 6 on the chart.
Yep.
It gives you one more Deny the Witch test as well. And then whenever a unit within, I don't know, is it 12 inches of them, gives a -1 to psych test. So it's basically a psychic hood with an additional deny.
Yeah, but you gotta be within 12. Ooh.
And unless part of the reason that this is a problem, this Pure Will, is because of the fact that, again, well, the -1 for the psychic hood ability, 12 inches, that is kind of that's not great.
So,
but with that said, the fact that you can deny additional power, the only time this is going to be useful is if you're running, like
if you're fighting psychers,
a lot of psychers, and you're running the Sacred Rite that gives you the +3 to that deny.
Yep. So that can be really
powerful.
powerful.
The only time it's useful.
But don't you have to pick your Warlord traits before your opponent is?
Do.
So yeah, you might be stuck with a Warlord trait that actually does nothing.
Right. Yeah. So the only time you're ever going to want to run this is if for some reason you just want the psychic denial, like because if you're afraid the opponent might show up with a lot of psychers.
Yeah.
Or if you already kind of know who your opponent is and you just want to make it.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
at
a little
that point, it comes down
that's
to
a little
whether or not
questionable.
you want to play, because we don't list here in the studio, but if you really needed to, if your opponent gave you the opportunity to list against them or whatever the case is, and you really want to take advantage of that, that's one way to do it. But again, Pure Will is situational, which is why it's one of those ones that's not super great. So that's partly why it's my least favorite in this chart.
Yep.
But with that said, it can be pretty powerful in certain scenarios.
So one honorable mention I want to say is the Order of the Eblis Chalice. That's the Terrible Knowledge. So this is the Warlord trait I was talking about that was really good, even though their order's kind of so-so.
Yeah.
If this Warlord is on the battlefield, the miracle dice you gain at the start of the first battle round is a 6. You just automatically start the game with a 6 for a miracle die.
Oh, you get extra command points too, right?
Yep, and then at the start of the battle, first battle round, if you're battle forged, which you probably are, you get D3 command points.
Yep.
So you're getting for sure 1 command point out of this Warlord trait, up to 3.
Yeah. I honestly, this is it's not my favorite one, but I think it's really good. And the fact that it ties both the auto 6 miracle dice and the D3 together, it makes it pretty good. If it was one or the other and not both, I don't think you would ever take this.
No.
But the fact that you get the two of them together, it really adds a lot to the army.
Yeah.
When the army already has a lot to begin with, but now you're adding that much more. And command points are so valuable that any extra command points you can get, it really adds a lot to what the army can do. So yeah, I definitely think it's a good one. Just finishing up the non-order based ones.
Yeah.
Executioner of Heretics gives you -1 to leadership within a 6-inch range. I don't think it's a good one, especially if you could find ways to stack more minus leadership abilities on.
There's a little bit in the army, but it's not like Night Lords.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's limited, and I think that's the problem with this. If there was weapons like butcher cannons and stuff like that where you could reduce leadership and kind of stack exponentially on top, then you could find a reason to maybe take this. But I don't think it's ever going to be effective in a game enough to justify taking it over one of the other ones.
So, Sisters have ways of doing it between, stratagems and relics. They can have, a nasty, -4 to your leadership.
Yeah.
But you're stacking all these layers into just trying to get them to fail a morale test.
Right. Well, now it comes down to spending command points and certain units doing certain things. Yeah. It's not like Night Lords where they just have so many ways to get lots of negative leadership. You really have to build on it to make it worthwhile.
Yep.
And frankly, because of the fact that the other Warlord traits are just so good,
Yep.
Arguably, there's no way you're going to be able to justify taking this one.
And I think that's a big problem with a lot of these warlord traits is they're all trying to compete with like Beacon of Faith and Indomitable Belief,
Yeah.
and it's like which you can take multiple warlord traits in your army.
Yeah,
So
you can take two. So I mean, you can find ways to use them, but
Yep. One of the ones I would say to really stay away from is the Martyred Ladies. So add one to the wound characteristics warlord, and you add one to their armor save. So this is bad because it's so contradictory to what the Martyred Lady does. You get a benefit from your models dying.
yeah,
Like when your character dies, you get 2 miracle dice.
yeah,
This makes your character harder to die.
yeah.
So
that's true.
what's
So
why?
the way I look at this is Martyr Lady covets its characters. The only time you're ever going to run Martyr Lady as a regular, in my opinion, is if you're running multiple detachments or ways to run a lot of characters. So like preachers, priests, just stacking the army to the teeth with little characters, magnifiers, hospitalers, dialogists, all those different characters. Martyr Lady is super useful for that kind of stuff because when those units start going down, you start getting a lot of miracle dice and stuff, which is great. And then you can start putting your characters out in the open. Now, Order of the Martyred Ladies Warlord trait, I think this is going to be something you're going to want to use to make, if you want to make your character very hard to kill, because there are a couple relics that can make your character just viciously hard to kill.
Yeah.
I mean, off the bat, they already get a 4-pin vault save. All your cannonettes get it.
Yep.
So, granted, they are toughness 3, but now you're getting +1 to wounds, so now you're going to be 6 wounds apiece with a 2-up base save,
A 2-up,
a
4-up.
4-up invuln.
Yep.
You get the Curios if you want it, which gives you a 5-up Feel No Pain.
It just feels so weird because you're making your character harder to die, and you're playing
An army that loves
to die.
Yeah. It's funny because it's like playing Death Corps of Krieg with a character that's built around surviving, which just doesn't make sense. And I totally get that.
Yep.
I don't think this is a bad warlord trait. I just think, like you said, with the way it plays into the detachment, just seems kind of silly.
Yeah.
And
Like if this was the Bloody Rose one, I'd like it a lot better.
well, and another part that you run into too is the fact that this literally only works on one model. Are you really, with all the other warlord traits on these on the lists of the 2 different warlord trait lists, or whatever, the orders or the regular ones, is it really worth taking this over the other ones? And again, the competition is so tight here that you can't justify taking ones that are like this, that are just so selective. I think generally you're going to shy away from this one. This is definitely not my favorite for a lot of reasons.
Yep.
So the other 2 on the list here from the regular ones, we got Righteous Rage, which is rerolling charges, I believe. Yep. Whenever you make a charge, you can reroll any or all of the dice. So if you roll a 1 and you roll a 6, you can reroll that 1, make your charge. In addition to that, whenever you charge, you can reroll the wound roll. So, or you charge, get charged. This is a Bloody Rose trait, in my opinion. Yeah. This is definitely one for where you're using a character that's got some real combat prowess, and you kind of just make it a smash canoness.
Yep.
Run her in there, and she can just bulldoze the living bejesus out of stuff. Rerolling to wound on a model that generally doesn't have great strength anyway. But the AP -4 and -3 in the sword, or whatever the case is. I think Bloody Rose has a relic where the thing gives like a whole ton of attacks. It's like 3 extra attacks.
I think it's like 3 extra attacks.
It's like the Teeth of Terra, so
yep.
it makes it vicious, and then when you stack the reroll wounds on top of this thing, you get a ton of attacks that are all rerolling wounds, and then you're also rerolling your charges to make sure you get there. So
yeah, like I was saying,
it's a fun trait. I don't think, again, this is, you're fighting with the competition just like you were with the Martyr Lady one. I just think this one outweighs the Martyr Lady one, especially because of the fact that Bloody Rose is a more popular order to take. Yeah. And there's a lot of times when you're playing Bloody Rose, you're going to want to run a Smash Canoness that does this kind of stuff. So having it's nice. It's just, do you want to spend the CP for the extra trait? And is it worth taking over some of the other ones? So Inspiring Orator is the only other one on this list that's generalized, not order locked. And this one adds 1 to the leadership of your characters. And then order units can use their leadership instead of their own when they're within 6 inches. This is one of my least favorite on the list because, again,
leadership
is not a huge problem for
them. You don't have problems with morale.
I think it can be cute because there are some things in the game
It
that
does.
play
It does
against
make everything
leadership.
leadership 10.
Yeah.
So now you're like Necrons for
Um,
leadership.
No, it only adds her one to her leadership, and then everything around her can use her leadership.
Yeah,
but it's
so-
only for Moraltas, I think, right?
Yeah, it's only for morale tests.
Oh, it's
So-
not. No, it says friendly order units can use this leadership characteristic instead of their own.
Oh, okay.
So it's not even for Moraltas.
So
So
it's
this
not
actually
even-
can be useful for other units as well.
Like hallucinogen grenades or something like that.
Yeah.
But,
the
yeah,
first
like-
thing that comes to mind for me is like the Harlequin grenades that go against like your leadership tests. You know, my leadership versus your leadership, stuff like that. This really benefits those. But with that said, again, it's situational.
But yeah, most of your like bigger characters are leadership 9, and then this will bring them to 10, and then everyone around them can use that 10
Yeah.
instead of.
I think it's
their
I think
leadership.
it's cute to have pretty high leadership throughout your army. But with that said, again, leadership's designed for morale purposes.
Yeah.
In first and foremost, and
First
I
and
think
foremost.
when you look at Sisters of Battle, that leadership bonus really doesn't make a huge difference for them,
No.
because a lot of times they're not ever going to utilize it. So,
Nope.
but that covers the regular Warlord traits. We're going to finish up with the rest of them here. So we have the Valorous Heart one. This one is not my favorite one because all it does is it gives your Warlord a 5 of Feel No Pain.
Yeah, but they already have a 6-up Feel No Pain.
Yeah,
So that's why it's like
yeah, and that's partly why I
it
don't
makes
think
your
this is a great
character
one.
tougher.
Well, and part of the problem too is the fact that you can take the relic to get the 5 up Feel No Pain as
Yeah.
well, which, you know, unless you need the relic, like I can't think of any, like you can't take any of the other relics that I think are really worth taking for this to make this worth taking.
No.
The relics don't match up well with this particular trait, and you're only adding 1 to your Feel No Pain on a character that's probably not going to be targeted most of the game anyway.
Yep.
So it's not bad, but it's not good in a lot of ways. I would avoid this if I was taking, especially when you can
Yep.
considering Indomitable Belief and Beacon of
Indomitable
Faith
Belief,
still on
yep.
the list. And I think people are probably starting to see at this point Indomitable Belief and Beacon of Faith really shine so well over all the other ones in this
Yep.
book. So if you're a new player starting out and you're kind of wondering, oh hey, well what Warlord trait should I take? First and foremost, Indomitable Belief. That's going to make your army-wide 4-up invuln save, or 5-up base, and then you can get the 4-up invuln.
Yeah, with a character. Yeah.
So this is going to be the winner in every case. And then after that, then do you spend the CP? Which one do you want after that? Beacon of
Yeah.
Faith generally is going to win, with the option of taking a couple of the other ones if you'd rather. So, but yeah, so covering the rest of them here, we have. I guess if you want to go over.
Yeah, we have the Bloody Rose, so that gives you a +1 attack characteristic in a turn in which you charge. And in
charge
addition,
and
they can
advance.
charge. They can advance and charge.
Yeah.
So that's for Bloody Rose, who are going to want to be in the combat. Again, it just makes your Smash Canoness a little fightier.
Yeah.
It's a good one. It's really going to be in contention between that and the Righteous Rage one.
Yeah.
Which one you're going to want to use?
Yeah, +1 attack is never a bad thing, especially on a unit that fights in melee, that has a decent weapon in melee. And a lot of times your Bloody Rose character is going to have a pretty one. Whether it's the Blessed Blade or it's the Relic Chainsword, both of them are pretty vicious. With that said, though, it's again in contention with Righteous Rage, which is more of a buff because it's not just your character. You can reroll any charge roll for any of the dice. It's not just one or the other, as opposed to this one allowing you to advance and charge. I mean, how often is your character going to foot slog it up the board and then advance and charge? Probably not often.
Not often.
So it's not that it's bad. It's just that it's again situational. The +1 attack is never situational. That's always a good thing.
Always
But
good.
it's only a small buff when you compare it to some of the other ones. in
Well,
this
it
list.
should be in addition to the Bloody Rose, so you're getting 2 extra attacks between
Yeah,
Warlord
I mean
Traits.
they do add up and they stack.
Yeah.
But I mean, on average your Canoness is by itself, even without this Warlord traits, getting
4
six attacks.
Plus
Well, they
the-
get 4
yeah.
base,
Yep, 4
plus the one from Bloody Rose, plus this one as well. And then if you take the Teeth of Terra, whatever relic,
Yeah.
not the Teeth of Terra one, but the one, the Chainsword gives
The,
a bunch of
the
extra attacks.
extra
as well.
attack relic. Yep.
So you can get like 8, 9, 10 attacks. Plus, I think there's a stratagem for more attacks.
Yeah.
And you got your Ministorum Priest that gives another attack. So this one attack generally, at some point, kind of just is like, well, it's not that great because you're already getting so many. You really don't need the one extra anyway. I mean, it's icing on the cake. So
Yep.
I'm not saying it's bad. It's just, again, it's in contention with better
Yep.
ones. So
One of the one of the ones that is fairly bad, and it kind of ties in. This is the Sacred Rose one.
Yeah.
Because Sacred Rose has fallen so much, it makes this one even less appealing.
Yeah.
Because now, whenever you spend a Miracle Dice on a 5+, you get a Miracle Dice back. Now, whenever you use an Act of Faith on this particular character, you just gain a Miracle Dice. You don't have to roll a 5+. That's all it does.
Yeah.
It feels a little weak when you're already getting that ability on a 5+.
Yeah. So my problem with the Sacred Rose one is the fact that it's just your Warlord that does it, and how often are you performing an
You
Act of
have
Faith?
to use a Miracle Dice on your Warlord for this to trigger.
Yeah. So whenever you perform an Act of Faith for the Warlord, gain 1 Miracle Dice. I mean, yes, there's going to be situations where you're probably going to use Miracle Dice in your Warlord, but there's a lot of scenarios where your Warlord might be a Canoness sitting in the back with 3 Exorcists buffing them for the rerolls.
Yep.
So, frankly, it's not going to be useful in every game. And if it is useful, it's situational.
Yeah, especially when you compare it to like Beacon of Faith, which just gives you Miracle Dice.
Yeah. It's not. It's definitely not my favorite. It's probably one of my least favorite here. I mean, you could theoretically you could stack this with Beacon of Faith, and then it would be really kind of interesting to see how many Miracle Dice you could add up. But
Because it basically makes using Acts of Faith on your Warlord free.
yeah, that's exactly what it does. It makes it free. So, I mean, it gives you a reason to use Miracle Dice on your Warlord, but unless you have a Warlord that's constantly active throughout the game, you're going to lose out on a lot of Miracle Dice you could get elsewhere. So,
Yep.
I'll let Mars talk about the Ebon Chalice one, but I just wanted to go over the Argent Shroud one.
Well, we already did the Elvis
Oh,
Chalice
did we?
one.
Okay.
Yep.
So the Argent Shroud one, which is the last one on this list, this allows you to perform Heroic Intervention up to 6 inches, and then move 6 inches, which is nice. But the thing is the only time you ever really want to perform Heroic Intervention or you're wanting to move is if you're Bloody Rose, because the only time you really want to be in combat is if you're Bloody Rose. All the other rest of the scenarios, it's never a good thing to be in combat. I mean, with that said, I guess you could build kind of a melee character and still get them into combat. They just won't have the combat prowess Bloody Rose does.
Yeah.
So that can be a problem. And then the other half of this trait, I think, is kind of I don't know. It's a silly one because I think this would actually be better if they rewrote this. So what it does, it allows you to fight first in the turn that you get charged or whatever the case is. I think what they should do is they should change this around to make a unit fight last, so you can select.
I would like that a lot better. Yeah.
Because fighting first is fine and well.
You're
but
probably
your
already
opponent-
fighting first because you charged.
Well, in this case, like say if you perform, well, I think this is really designed. If you get perform a heroic
Or no,
intervention.
it's Heroic Interventions.
If you perform a heroic intervention, you get within range of them. I mean, yeah, you have a little bit more room to wiggle with, which is nice. Your heroic intervention can be longer, which again is nice. But when you get tied up in combat with that person, they're still going first because it's fight first.
Yeah.
And it's their turn, and your fight first gets canceled out by the fact that they made the charge. So they become equal at that point.
Yep.
So they're still gonna get a unit to fight first with. So if they really want to, they can make attacks against this character, and they'll never get to use the fight first anyway. So I think fight first it's not a bad rule, but it's like one of those rules where there's a lot of situations where it just doesn't come into play, and that's unfortunate. But I mean, yeah, in your case, if you do make a charge, having the fight first is kind of cute. But I think this would be much better if they reworded it to be pick a unit and make that unit fight last. And that way you can force the fact that at least you'll have a unit to fight with before their unit gets to completely bludgeon you to death.
Yep.
So it's not my favorite Warlord trait. No. Honestly, I would skip this primarily just because of the fight first rule.
Yep. And again, this is locked into the order that lets you advance and fire without penalty.
Yeah, this is an order that isn't designed to be in melee. They're designed to move around a lot and they're mobile, but with that said, this is a Warlord trait that wants to be a melee Warlord trait, kind of. But it's not a good one. It's not good. So yeah, I would pass on this one.
Yeah.
So that covers Warlord traits. We're going to be going over relics now.
Relics.
I don't think we have to go through all of them. I guess maybe just...
No, we're just going to pick and choose. A lot of them are just, they're stronger weapons, or they make your character fightier or harder to kill.
Yeah.
So one of the ones that feels pretty weak to me is the Mantle of Ophelia. So that can only be put on a Canoness, and it brings your invulnerable save to a 3+.
Yeah.
instead of a 4+.
Yeah.
Now, if you could put that on something that didn't have an invuln save, that'd be amazing.
Yeah.
But it's only really improving your save by 1.
Yeah. Well, I think the problem is Shield of Faith, because Shield of Faith is army wide, and
Yep.
no matter what, you're going to get up to a 4-up invuln as long as you're nearby the characters that boost it. So it's never going to come into play much, and if it does, the +1 to your invuln save really doesn't make or break the difference.
Especially when you factor in like Miracle Dice, where you can just be like, I rolled a 4.
Well, and the fact that you're using it on a model with T3 that has 5 wounds at best, so that that extra +1 to your invuln most of the time is not going to save your model when your model's getting hit by multi-damage weapons. So if your character's out in the open, they're getting pummeled, or get caught up in combat, that 3-up invuln is not going to save them over the 4-up in most cases.
So like a 3+ invuln is incredibly good, but the problem with this relic is it's on a character who already has a 4-up invuln.
Yeah.
So it's not really improving it all that much.
I think it would be more valuable if the characters costed a lot more, or if they had enough combat prowess to where they could make up the difference. Because if you look at Space Wolves, where they had their Thunderwolf cavalry characters, their cavalry characters like the Thunderwolf Wolflord, taking the Storm Shield on them is phenomenal. Getting up to 3-up invuln, as opposed to having a 4-up iron halo. That 3-up invuln really makes a huge difference when you're talking about a guy who's toughness 5 with 7-8 wounds, and they hit hard. Where these characters, in this case, it's nice if they survive, but the 3-up isn't going to make enough of a difference between the 4-up to justify spending a relic on them. So I agree. I think this is one of the ones where it's a fun trait, but it's a fun relic, but it's never going to be used.
I just feel like you're not getting enough value out of it.
Yeah. If this added like a 5-up Feel No Pain on top of it, then you might want to start considering.
Then we can start considering it.
Yeah, but I think it just doesn't do enough for what you're getting. So, you can't waste the relic slot for that. So
otherwise, Blazer of Eternal Flame.
Yeah, the Brazier Eternal Flame's good.
I really like. It can be very powerful. But an enemy cycler within 18 inches, you subtract 2 from their results.
Yeah.
That can just shut down most powers. Like some Tzeentch powers need a 9 to cast.
Yeah.
This jacks it up to 11.
Yeah.
That's damn near impossible.
So
it's really strong. The thing I don't like about it is it replaces
a model with a Brazier of Holy Fire only.
It replaces your Brazier of Holy Fire.
The only thing that can take it.
So that's a really powerful item in itself. Otherwise, you can take the Null Rod, which is, again, powerful against Psychers. So I really like this relic, but it's replacing an item that's already really strong. So again, it's a lot like the Mantle of Ophelia.
Yeah.
It's good, but are you really getting enough value out of it because you're losing out on something that's already really good?
Yeah, and again, this for me, I think this comes down to the fact that, again, it's just like with the Warlord trait. What is it? Pure Will. Now, if in circumstances where you're playing against a psychic army, if you're able to choose this, again, this becomes circumstantial. If you're able to choose this trait, this relic, this ability, when you need it, rather than having to potentially waste it on something you might not ever need. So if your opponent doesn't show up with psychers, it's never going to do you any good. But if your opponent's showing up with psychers, you take this relic, you take the Warlord trait, you stack those two together for the -3 within 12 inches now. Yeah. That becomes really interesting. People like Magnus are just shut down.
Yeah.
It really turns off a lot of extra real good psychic. But with that said, it's also so incredibly situational that
again, because I believe you have to take at least one relic in your list, and then you can use the stratagem to get more when you see your opponent is right.
Yep. Okay. Yep. So this would be in a situation where you take your additional
relics
and then spend the CP prior to the game for the extra relics. But if you're not stacking this with the Pure of Will, I mean the -2, it's good, but is it worth a relic slot? Probably not.
Especially considering what the Null Rod already does.
Yeah. So I would pass on this in most cases, unless I'm playing against an opponent I know is bringing heavy psychic, and they got some bonuses to their psychic powers, because this can just outright shut a psychic army down. It's actually better than the
Magnus.
It's actually better than the Culexus Assassin. But again, like I said, it's situational. So
Yep.
you kind of want to avoid situational relics, warlord traits, and stuff like that if you can, primarily because of the fact that they may never benefit you throughout a game. But when they do come up, it's fun to have them. So
Yeah, I don't know how much more we need to cover on this. They're all very solid, but like I said, they make your characters fightier. They're stronger weapons.
yeah,
One I did want to touch on is the Wrath of the Emperor. It replaces a bolt pistol. You have equipped on the model. It is 18-inch range, pistol 4, strength 5, AP 2, damage 2.
yeah.
This is a really strong pistol.
It's,
And that's the thing. It's like you're not replacing some brazier of holy flame. It's your
replacing
pistol.
a bolter. Yeah.
You don't need this expensive weapon to get this.
Yeah.
It's a really strong gun.
I would agree, like especially if you like your pistols in your army, and if you're running like
Bloody Rose.
Bloody Rose.
We'll make that AP3.
And the Sacred Rites with the extra AP and all that stuff. You can really stack on a lot and get this thing up to like AP4, AP3, which makes it really interesting. And it's an 18-inch range pistol, which is
it's not short
pistols
at all.
At 5.22, this thing really packs a punch. The problem I run into with this, though, that I've never taken it, is primarily because of the fact that I could run a bolter with the 2 shots generally I'm getting.
Yeah.
And
it's not bolter.
It's not so much better than a bolter. I mean, it is better than the bolter. Clear and far away from the better than the bolter.
Like,
but,
what?
But again, is it so much better than a bolter that it's worth giving up a relic slot for? And yes and no. Again, it's one of those things where, first of all, you need a Canoness because you need the ballistic skill to make this
not necessarily.
useful.
You could take that on a...
You can take it on the characters. I'm just saying you need the ballistic skill. That's the problem because Canoness, their ballistic skill with their reroll 1s.
Yeah, ballistic skill 2, reroll 1s.
That's going to make the pistol useful at that point and more accurate. So you almost kind of need it on the Canoness. And I think you can justify taking it. The problem is a lot of times relic slots are going to fill things in your army that are unique that you otherwise wouldn't be able to do. And a lot of cases, I'm not going to want to give up a relic slot for replacing my bolter, which is already decent as is. Not only that, they have to take I mean, that's just a bolter I'm talking about. Now they can take combi weapons. They can take other pistols that are even better than
Infernal pistol.
Inferno, the plasmas, they're all better than this weapon. Now, I mean, you can make arguments again for this weapon to be useful, and the fact that it doesn't cost you anything to get it, just a relic slot, it's kind of nice. But again, I mean, it is somewhat limited just due to its range, due to the fact that it's a pistol. And
it's kind of limited to just being like a Primaris bully.
Yeah.
So it's not going to be effective against like vehicles. It's probably going to be a little wasted against like guardsmen.
Yeah, it's still cute against some things.
It is a strong weapon for what it is.
You can find a lot of reasons to want to use this. Generally speaking, in terms of relic weapons, in most cases, I've never really found a way for me to want to use the ranged ones in most cases, with the exception of the Tau and the Imperial Guard. Yeah. Because they're ones that can utilize those weapons to the best of their ability, and they don't really have a choice because they don't have melee weapon options. Whereas, like, if you look at Space Marines, you look at Sisters of Battle, they got some range or some melee weapons that really outperform the other melee weapons that they otherwise would have. Now, like, the power swords and whatnot are cool. I mean, they get some decent weapons. The Blessed Blades for Sisters is also good. I think, like, probably the 2 ones I would take in here I would probably consider would be either the Bloody Rose Sword or the Blade of Admonition. Yeah. The Blade of Admonition, I think, is kind of one of those ones where it's not super great, but it's pretty good because it's just a damage 3 +1 strength power sword. And it replaces a Blessed Blade, which has a similar stat profile. It's just better damage.
Similar, yeah.
And again, +1 strength. So this is a good relic. It's just, again, you're going to give up a relic slot for
something that's slightly better.
Well, and the thing is you already have a character with a Blessed Blade because this is what it replaces, and that's already a good melee weapon. So do you really need that much better of a melee weapon? Arguments could be made for it, but I don't know.
But yeah, like you were talking about, the Order of the Bloody Rose weapon,
Yeah, this is my favorite one, the Beneficence.
the Beneficence. So the bear, well, when it fights, it makes 3 additional attacks with this weapon, and it's +1 strength, AP2, 2 damage.
Yeah, this is basically the Teeth
And it
of
replaces
Terra.
a chainsword.
This is basically the Teeth of Terra for Sisters of Battle.
Yep.
I think a lot of people who play Space Marines will know just about how good the Teeth of Terra is on a character. They just chew through stuff, and especially when you got a character that's built for combat with rerolls this and reroll that. Additional
you got the
hits
Sacred
on
Rites
sixes.
for extra hits, yep.
You start stacking all that extra stuff. They get the +1 strength from the aura. They get the extra AP from the melee weapon, extra attacks. This thing can really start to.
It's got some real bite.
It can make a character really scary, especially when canasses are dirt cheap as it is. So, these things can actually overpower even some Smash captains in a lot of cases. And
I'd put it on par with like the Smash Captain.
well, the thing is your Smash
like
captain is
the
going to
Teeth
be
of
far more expensive than your canoness. So.
Yeah.
I think it's funny because you can trade this thing out for Smash Captain, and that Smash Captain, your opponent's going to be like, oh, well, that sucks. Where you lose this character, and it's like, okay, well,
I gained Miracle Dice.
I lost a Relic and gained a Miracle Dice. No big deal. So,
no big deal.
Honestly, you're not losing much by, if this character dies. And frankly, what this adds to that model is massive. That extra damage is huge. The +3 attacks, it's phenomenal for a chainsword weapon. So
Yep.
and chainsword, that's the thing, is chainswords aren't super good anyway. I mean, yeah, they add the AP -1 or whatever, and the 1 attack, but they're not good by any means. They're not really a great melee weapon. So
no.
This actually boosts the stats of the chainsword so much more than, like, for instance, the Blade of Admonition boosts the Blessed Blade. Yep. It's such a significant difference that it's worth taking. So.
I always like additional attacks rather than like more strength or more AP or more damage. Like
especially in models that have.
I like to go wide rather than quality.
Yeah, when you got a model that's already good at hitting and stuff like that, the extra attacks will really make a difference. So I think it's a good one.
I don't know if there's any other
you
want to.
More important ones here. The ones that really make the difference in the army. The Book of St. Lucius is probably my favorite one in this list. Especially when you roll this thing with your Warlord that's running the Indomitable Belief, and then you're also running the banner.
Yeah, so this book is still working off the old aura mechanics.
Right.
So I can't remember exactly how those work. So you don't have that little bracket where it says specifically what is and is not an aura.
There's no keyword aura for their stuff yet.
Yep.
So this works for all of their abilities that work in a bubble. So,
yeah.
Unfortunately,
I think there's some limitation, but yeah.
Yeah. So the Warlord trait, Indomitable Belief, works with this. In addition to the Shield of Faith, Tale of the Stoic from the Imagifier.
Yep.
So this gives you that 4-up invuln in a 9-inch bubble, just from that character alone. Just having that character gives you a 4-up invuln, and then when you stack Celestine on top there, you get a little bit more, a little extra. But this allows you to have a 9-inch bubble, which is pretty good size to be able to march your whole army up the battlefield and be incredibly durable.
Now it's only an extra 3 inches, which seems really small when you look at it, but when you're applying it to a 6-inch aura, that actually doubles its size when you do the math.
Effectively. And then you consider too the size of units as well, especially when Sisters of Battle can get up to 15 in a squad. You can spread out units so far to cover so much ground.
Oh yeah, they are 5 to 15, aren't they?
Yeah, 5 to 15. So they can spread out and cover so much ground and still stay within the aura to benefit that it makes them really able to stay within that 9-inch bubble and always be benefiting from that 4-up invuln save, which is massive. I think this is by far my favorite relic, primarily just because of the fact that it fits so well with the Imagifier.
Yeah, they're up to 15.
Yeah, they've always been 15. It's been like that since
that's really cool.
4th edition.
I so rarely see people running 15 of them.
Yeah, well, nobody usually does. It's just that you have the ability to. And the thing is even if you're not, you're talking about models that come on 32 mil bases now. They were 25s.
Are they? Did they upgrade them?
Yeah, so they've been replaced now with 32 mil bases, and that actually allows you to spread out even farther, to cover more ground. Now, if this was back before the new models came out when they were on 25 mils, then it was a problem because unless you're taking 15-woman squads, you can't really cover a whole lot of ground with 5 models or 10 models, whatever it is. But with the new models, and then in addition to the fact that this trait adds into that extra expansion range, it fits so well in 9th edition with the fact that you need the army to constantly be moving, to constantly be spreading out and covering ground, and still staying within that bubble for your 4-up invuln. It allows you to almost play a castle board wide, which is pretty awesome.
Yep.
Having that 4-up invuln with incredibly durable models in your army and still being able to cover a lot of objectives is essentially what 9th edition is all about.
Yep.
So I think this Warlord or this relic, I think it's if not the most powerful one, it's one of the more powerful ones, especially because of the fact, like you said, it's not just 3 inches from one side, it's a diameter increase.
Yep.
So it effectively doubles. It gives you an additional 6 inches of ground that you otherwise wouldn't cover. So yeah, it's phenomenal in terms of what it does for the army, and it's not locked to any one character either. I mean, it fits best on the Magifier in my opinion. However, you can benefit other characters as well, like the Canoness bubble and whatnot. So
yeah, so this is an army that has a lot of different auras, and you need to spread out and still stay with your auras for maximum benefit, and this will really help you do that.
right. So okay, going over. Let's see. There's a couple. I think there's 1 or 2 other ones in here I'd like to talk about.
Sure.
Before we move on here. So the Triptych has the 5-up funeral pain. Casket, -1 toughness, enemy units. This one's kind of cute. So the Casket of Penance, if you have a melee army, when they come in if your opponents come within an inch of a model with this relic, they get -1 to toughness. Now, if you're playing,
So you're going to be engagement range,
yeah.
but -1 toughness is huge.
Yeah, so what's nasty about this is if you pair this with Bloody Rose, which generally your models are going to be strength 4, primarily because of the tail of the warrior, tail of the whatever. So they get the +1 strength. Even at strength 3, it brings Marines down to toughness 3.
And then
so now
you go
at
up to
worst,
4.
you're still wounding on 4s with the +1 to strength from the aura.
Yep.
Now you're wounding on 3s. Where
Against
normally,
Marines.
if you were fighting a Marine without these abilities, you'd be wounding them on 5s,
Yep.
which is a massive swing. So I think it's really interesting to talk about this one because of the fact that, yes, you do have to have your unit in engagement range. That is a problem. I get that. But if you're running Bloody Rose and you're throwing this character into combat with your Repentia, with your other units anyway,
You can have that.
this can allow you to get those wounds on 3s, wounds on 2s that you wouldn't get, and it's a big deal.
You can have that Bloody Rose Warlord trait where you can advance and still charge.
Yeah.
And it gets you in that 1 inch range.
Now again, this isn't a relic that I think is like super great, primarily because of the fact that if you look at some of the other relics in the game, they give like -1 to wound, or +1 to wound or whatever. That wound difference actually is a much bigger swing than the +1 or the -1 to toughness.
Mm-hmm.
But with that said, this can still be utilized, especially on strength 3 models, to really swing that back around where they otherwise wouldn't be able to. So I think it's really interesting to look at this one, especially if you're playing Bloody Rose. And again, it comes down to whether or not you can afford the relics over some of the other ones. So let's see. There's another one here I think is interesting. Is the
Litanies of Fate.
Litanies of Faith, yeah.
Faith. Same thing.
So this gives you the re-roll on a miracle dice, right? When you gain a miracle dice, you can re-roll.
Yep, so when you gain a miracle dice, you roll it, and that's the number you're stuck with. This allows you to re-roll that die whenever you gain a miracle dice, so it can be a real advantage. Now, you might accidentally roll into something worse, and you're stuck with that.
Yeah. If you roll a 1 or a 2 and you don't really want them, especially because like 2s, 3s, and 4s,
well,
is the worst
because
thing you could roll.
The 1 is the worst thing you can roll outside of morale tests.
Right. So that's why 2s is the number in between you never want to roll, because you can never benefit from a 2 in most cases.
Yep.
Or a 3, you have your weapon skill 3, ballistic skill 3, stuff like that. So you can still use that.
Yep.
The 1s you're going to use exclusively for morale.
Yep.
Which is kind of nice. But with that said, I think this is an interesting one because of the fact that it's a little limited, because you can only use it once per turn. It's not like it's you can use it over and over again.
Oh yeah, once per turn.
So it's once per turn.
So you can gain multiple miracle dice throughout a turn,
Yeah.
but you can only use this relic once per turn.
Right. So it is a little limited, but the fact that you get to reroll a miracle dice, it allows you to control the miracle dice a little better.
Yep.
I think it's a pretty good one. I don't think it's the best relic in here, but I think you can find ways to use this every single turn, especially because miracle dice are just you're pouring in all game long.
Yeah, like we said, you're going to use it. You're going to save it, and you're going to use it to like reroll that too.
Yeah.
That you get.
And
but
what's more is this
how much
actually
of an effect is that really getting?
So this actually stacks not by itself, but like in addition to I think I want to say it's the Dialogus that also allows a reroll as well. And then in addition to that, there's the Triumph of St. Catherine that also allows a reroll as well. Or no, it doesn't allow a reroll. It gives you plus or minus 1 to the roll or something like that.
They modify it.
So this allows you to control the miracle dice better, and then when you pair that up with those two abilities, with those two characters, you can really make sure that your miracle dice are on point when you need them to be. I think it's a good one. I just think it's one of those ones where you kind of gotta debate, whether or not this is what you need.
Whether you need it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there are a lot of cases where you just probably pass on this one, but you could utilize it. So I think that's probably all the ones I want to cover.
Probably, yeah, everything we're going to cover.
The other weapons in here, they're okay, but nothing's exceptional. You got like a Melta pistol, which is kind of neat.
Yeah, it's a stronger Melta pistol.
But other than that, it's nothing super special. Yeah, I don't know. Really, the ones I would consider first and foremost is going to be the book and probably either litanies or one of the two swords, just because those are the ones that you're going to utilize most. The Wrath is another one that I think is kind of interesting as well. And I think if it wasn't for the fact that it wasn't, with it being 4 shots, you can make it useful. If it was only like 1 shot, kind of like the Melta pistol, it's like, would I really want to give up a relic for a single shot?
I felt it was an honorable mention because it takes your bolt pistol so far and beyond what a bolt pistol does.
From 1 shot up to 4 shots is actually quite interesting.
Yeah, strength 5, AP 2 damage.
Yeah, so by all means, I think it's pretty good. I think my history with relic weapons has never been great, so I think that's partly where I'm struggling.
All right, so I think we're moving over into stratagems.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Well, now, Sisters of Battle have a lot of stratagems.
Yep. So they got the basic ones, like getting extra relics and getting extra warlord traits. You can spend CP to get those.
Yeah. Yeah, they got quite a bit. Not quite as many as Space Marines, but they got a lot. And all of them, I think, for the most part, can be useful.
Yep.
One of the things I want to mention right off the bat is that most of these stratagems are for a particular unit. There's quite a few of them in here that are still like Adepta Sororitas units, but a lot of them in here are very specific on which units you're going to use them on.
Yep.
Because they only work well with certain units, or because they're only usable by certain units.
Yep.
For instance, like I don't remember which it is, but it's the one that allows Repentia to fight twice.
That's the next page.
Yeah, so that one's called.
That's the 3 CP one.
Can fight it was a fight phase. Yep. Fight. Yeah. So 3 CP, desperate for redemption, allows you to fight twice with a Repentia unit. I think this is a really good one. You can use it on penitent engines and mortifiers too, but not everybody's always running those in their lists either. So, but definitely great on Repentia because it allows your Repentia to just chop down something and then move forward and chop down another thing. It is wicked and very, very strong. Granted, you are paying 3 CP for it, but
yeah, it's like the other fight again ones.
A lot of people can make the argument that
they also cost 3 CP.
Yeah, a lot of people can make an argument right now that Repentia are the strongest melee unit in the game. I wouldn't make an argument against them. I think there are other units that are still pretty deadly, but these girls can get 4-up invuln saves with Feel No Pain and a 3 attacks apiece.
Base, I think?
I think they're either 2 or 3 attacks apiece, and they have strength 6 swords.
Yeah, they have the Eviscerators, which are just really big chain swords.
So Repentias are, strength 6, AP minus 3, 2 damage. So these things just butcher Marines.
Yep.
They do get the -1 to hit, which is a little bit of a letdown.
Well, they hit on 3s, so that'll drop you to 4s.
Well, and that's the thing. Sisters of Battle already have a weapon and skill of 4. army-wide, except for the Repentia. So they're like the Repentias and the Celestians are the exceptions here with their weapon skill. But most of your units are having stuck with weapon skill 4. And I think the fact that these girls get a 3 up weapon skill with the addition of the fact that they're losing a -1 to hit, but nothing else can make them -1. They're always just -1.
It's just going to be max -1.
It doesn't matter what your opponent has. It never matters. It's always whatever you have. And then they have a 5 up feel no pain. In addition to the fact that they're Adepta Sororitas, so they do benefit from the Shield of Faith.
Yep. And they are Order, so they have that as well, so they can be blood arrows.
Yep, and they come with Zealot, so they're rerolling the hit rolls in the charge.
Yep.
These girls are vicious. So when you
They
talk
are
about,
really,
and again, we'll talk about these when we get to the data sheet, but when these girls get into combat, that stratagem is so incredibly useful. And the fact that it's the end of the fight phase, which means if you didn't make a charge that turn, it's at the end of the fight phase, you can still attack a unit you didn't charge.
Yes.
Because you can only attack the unit you charged when you make a charge.
Yep.
But that doesn't matter when the fight phase is over.
Yep.
So now you can still fight them. A unit that
you can select a unit to fight if either you charged or you're within engagement range then.
Right.
So if you meet one of those two factors, you can fight with them.
Yep.
So we talked about battle rights, and that's very iffy. Like if you're, it makes your sacred rights random. Yeah, we talked about that already. It's very questionable if it should even be in a stratagem at all.
I like it. I think it's fine. It's one of those things where it's situational. It just depends on whether or not you really want to roll randomly.
Yeah, it can be easily avoided.
It's your savior if you roll randomly and fail miserably. So,
but if you fail miserably.
But you know what? I think in the long run, your faith should have been harder in the end.
So Moment of Grace can be absolutely clutch. So it's 1 CP, use the stratagem, making hit roll or wound roll for Adepta Sororitas from your army, or when they make a saving throw.
Yeah.
So you can use it on a hit, a wound, or a saving throw for a Adepta Sororitas character. Or not character, but unit, model.
Yeah.
And you discard 1 to 3 miracle dice, and then you can adjust the die by that amount.
Yeah.
So now when you use miracle dice, you have to do it before you make a roll. Yeah. So you can't roll it and then be like, oh, I got a bad roll, I'm going to fix it.
Yeah. This replaces
it just replaces it. Now this stratagem allows you to
take
the result of that dice and then modify it.
Yeah.
So this can be very clutch because I'm sure we've all had plenty of games like when we were fighting against the Satan and he had 1 wound left and you're like, oh, I failed 1 wound, I need to use a CP reroll. This can be very clutch because you can just modify it into what you need.
Well, and what's cute about this is this actually turns Moment of Grace is better than that because you get to roll your die roll. You can spend the CP command reroll if you want.
Yep.
And then after that command reroll, whatever that result is, you can spend the CP after that roll is made to now change your command reroll into a +1, +2, +3.
Yep.
Depending on whatever your result
whatever
is.
you need.
And however many miracle dice you did.
So it's such a good one to have in your back pocket for when you really need it. It's only 1 CP.
It's like a command reroll for a command reroll. You just have to sacrifice some miracle dice for it.
Yeah, some miracle dice and a CP. So it's a little costly, but it can be extremely clutch if you need it to save like a precious model.
Yes, it's very, very, very good. For 1 CP, I honestly can't find a reason to default this at all.
One of the more questionable ones is Martyr's Immolation. Use the stratagem when an immolator from your army is destroyed. You can spend 1 CP and make it automatically explode.
I love this so much.
Now, the immolator... now, some of those, like, Prometheum tanks, they have a bigger explosion, like they do 2d6 or whatever. They explode larger, they do more mortal wounds, but it has a basic, very 6-inch 4d3 mortal wounds. This one's really questionable because it's like, why am I spending CP to make my thing auto-explode?
So here's the way I look at it.
Like, I already explode on a...
6.
No, I think it's a 5 for the immolator.
Immolators might be a 4 up, actually. Or 5 up, something like that. But
yeah, I think that's one of the reasons I didn't like it.
The way I look at it is, if you're playing an army with immolators, you're probably running a couple of them. Now, the first thing you want to do with this thing when it gets low is run this thing as far.
It only explodes on a 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you run this thing into combat, you get it as close to the enemy up against as many units as you possibly can and force it to blow up. Now, you charge the opponent, make your opponent kill it in melee, and there's nothing more demoralizing than watching half of your army getting destroyed by an explosion result that your opponent forced upon you because your own unit killed it in combat.
I guess.
It is so demoralizing that it's one of my favorite stratagems. It's not always good because there's a lot of...
It's a fun stratagem, but I think it's very situational.
It's similar, like, you're going to use this thing if your immolator is dying. Like, if you know it's going to die, you know, it's only got a couple wounds left or whatever the case is, you know, you want it to blow up, so you're going to charge this thing in. You're going to sacrifice that couple of flamers that you otherwise would have got. And frankly, you're still going to get to shoot with the immolator before it dies, too. So, you know, you run up. These things got it's got the dual heavy flamer on there.
What, when you pay for Overwatch, you mean?
No, I'm saying during your turn. So you're going to run this thing up as close as you can during your turn. You're going to fire the flamer, and then you're going to charge the flamer into combat to a unit that guaranteeingly can kill it in combat, and then watch it blow up and kill all your opponent's models around it. Now, granted, it's D3 mortal wounds per unit, so it's not all, you know, it's not a ton. But the thing is when you got this thing that can forcefully cause a massive explosion and take off wounds from models that otherwise are incredibly durable. Like, look at Death Guard. When, you know, Death Guard can't survive this. When Space Marines can't survive this. It ends up racking up pretty quick over a game. Now, if you have 3 immolators in the battlefield...
I mean, if you keep doing it over and over...
That's my point. You know, you're going to run this when you got, like, 3 immolators in the battlefield.
Yeah, well, I feel like you need to be in range of at least, like, 3 units to really get value out of this, because it's D3 mortal wounds. You could end up dealing, like, even against 3 units, 3 mortal wounds. Yeah. But is that really worth your CP?
Well, so here's, again, like I said, look at some of the other stratagems in the game. There's so many stratagems in the game out there where you spend a CP to deal D3 mortal wounds. I can't tell you. Every codex has one at least, and it's situational. Now this, yes, again, it has to do it to a specific unit, but the explosion
can hurt you
and the fact that it kills your model sucks too. But at the same time, if your model is going to die anyway, you give it up the model that's going to die for the sake of killing a bunch of their stuff too.
It's not a bad one to have in your back pocket. It's just very situational, and it's questionable. Like I said, you're probably only going to do it if you have like 3 enemy units in range.
Yeah, you need you need an immolator to begin with, and not everybody always runs immolators because of they're only able to carry 6 models, which is a bit of a problem for a transport.
A little bit.
But with that said, I think it's really fun, and if you can get it in there and get it to do what you want it to do, this stratagem can be pretty clutch, especially on models that are durable. So I think overall it's a good stratagem, but again, like Mar said, it is situational. There's a lot of factors that come into play whether or not you can use this. So
another questionable one is Furious Recital. So that only works on an Exorcist. So you spend a CP, and enemy units within 12 inches get -1 to their leadership until the end of the round. If they're a Chaos unit, they get -2 instead. So this one's really, again, like the other leadership things we've talked about, you can stack them up, but they're just these layers upon layers to try and get them to fail morale tests.
Yeah.
I think you're honestly much better off saving your CP for something else.
Well, the fact that you're spending CP to maybe do something is always never a good trade. If you can guarantee that the CP is going to do something, if you can force them to fail morale, yes, it can be useful. But again, it comes down to the way morale works now. You might only lose 1 model, even if they do fail morale.
Even if they do, they might only fail 1.
You know, because they guaranteedly lose 1 when they fail, but then they might roll enough or high enough that they don't lose any more models.
Yeah,
so at that point, you just spend a CP.
We saw in our game, I had the Kroot lose 1 model for morale. Yeah. The other 10 rolled for attrition. They're like, nope, we're fine.
Right. So again, you know, you're spending CP to maybe kill 1 model, and with the possibility of killing more.
Possibility.
The trade is at this point the juice is not worth the squeeze. Leadership is one of those things where if your army is built around reducing leadership and it does well at it, can force leaderships all game long, then it's great. But in most cases, you're not going to want to build around this. So. There's a couple of ones in here. Divine Intervention's phenomenal. That's 2 CP when a character dies.
Yes.
As long as it's not a named character. And unfortunately, my home girl, they did edit to make her add her in there. So unfortunately, Ephrael Stern can no longer use this either. She was able to because she wasn't originally in the list. They did update and fact this, so now she's part of it. But with that said, a non-named character, which includes anything not Celestine, not Judith, not Judith, whatever.
Yep.
Not the
Adepta
Triumph,
Sororitas
not Jacobus, not Ephrael Stern. All of them can, when they die, and I think it's a 4+, right?
No,
No,
they
just
automatically come
come
back. So that's the thing about it is, unlike the Necron one, where it's a 4+ if they come back or not, this one they automatically come back.
2 CP to guarantee you get your character back.
But it's 2 CP,
And then you gotta spend miracle dice.
and then you have to spend between 1 and 3 miracle dice to get that many wounds back on them.
Yep. So what you're going to want to do with this is you're going to want to probably spend 2 CP when a character goes down, get your character back up with 1 wound.
I don't think they benefit from, like, they don't count as dying, so, like, you do not gain, you do not gain miracle dice, so they don't really count as dying for your Martyr triggers.
But what this does is allows you to kill your character, let your character die for the phase, because they don't come back till the end of the phase. And then you're spending 2 CP and a single miracle die, in most cases, to get your character back with 1 wound. Then in the following turn, assuming you have a Hospitaller on the battlefield, now your Hospitaller is getting them back up to health. That's where this becomes the most useful. Getting a character back up to 3 wounds in most cases, yes, you might have the miracle dice to throw away to get an extra 2 wounds back. But in a lot of cases, you're not really going to spend that. So just having the character on the board is really what matters. It doesn't matter how many wounds they have, as long as they're alive. So I think this is a great stratagem for 2 CP. The fact that it's any of the sisters' characters, that includes your Magnifier, that includes your Canoness, it includes the Palatine when she comes out, it includes everything that's not named. So I think it's a good one.
Another good one, well, Holy Rage is 1 CP, and you use it on an Adepta Sororitas unit from your army, and they can advance and still charge. This is only really going to be effective on, like, your Repentia, because you need the Adepta Sororitas keyword, which only the Repentia being one of your strong melee units has. Now, like, you can use it on your basic sisters, but you generally don't want them in melee. So Holy Rage is really good because advancing and charging can really haul you across the table when you need it. But it's very limited on the units that can really utilize this stratagem effectively.
Repentia are arguably the best unit to use this on. I also could make an argument for Mortifiers being one of the better units as well, because
they do have the
just
keyword.
like Penitent Engines, Mortifiers literally footslog it. They don't have a choice. They have to run up the board, and you want to advance every opportunity you get to, because they're not super fast anyway. It's not that they're slow, they're just not fast. They got a long ways to go before they're getting there. And part of that problem is the fact that if they don't get there, they do nothing for the entire game. They just die.
So, the Mortifiers?
Yeah.
Well, the Mortifiers have ranged weapons.
Kind of. They're not great ones, are they?
Yeah, they are. They're heavy bolters.
Oh,
they're ballistic so far.
Okay. Those
so the Mortifiers are kind of your ranged versions of Penitent Engines. Now, they have melee. They still have melee weapons.
They can take 2, can't they?
They can take melee weapons.
Which is, it's still good. But.
So you don't necessarily want them in close combat. Now, they do have the Adepta Sororitas keyword, so they can use Holy Rage. Whereas the Penitent Engines don't have that keyword, so they actually can't use it. And they're the melee ones.
Well, no, Mortifiers are melee too, because they come with the melee weapons.
They can use it. That's what I'm saying, is they can use it, but they also have ranged weapons, so they're not strictly dedicated.
Yeah. I guess if you're really, if you're going to run the heavy bolter option where you're taking 2 heavy bolters, then I guess you could argue that this wouldn't be super good for. But, I mean, the fact that they get the buzz blades and the flails, and the fact that they're a vehicle, now they can shoot in combat as well. So I don't see any reason why you wouldn't want to get them in combat.
They are vehicles, so you could use it there.
The heavy bolters might be an exception because of the fact that you're losing a ballistic skill every time you're firing in melee with them.
Yeah.
But with that said, I mean, this is a unit that's really designed to be up close and personal. So, yeah, you're going to want to charge them across the board. Again, I agree. I think Penitent Engines would best utilize this ability probably more than any other unit in the army. Unfortunately, they don't have access to it.
Yeah, so it's a really good ability. It's just very limited in what's going to make good use of it.
Yeah. So it's a decent one for 1 CP. I think it's good.
One I find that is absolute trash is Faith and Fury.
Is that the where you got to spend? No, Holy Trinity is what I'm thinking of.
No, Holy Trinity's not the one.
Faith and Fury.
It's on this page.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
2 CP. When you perform an act of faith for a hit roll, you can use the same for the wound roll.
Yeah, so it costs 2 CP, and it's only when you're using a miracle die. You can then use it's only when you use a miracle die for a hit roll. You can then use that same result for the wound roll.
Okay, well.
And like, when do you really need this? And especially for 2 CP.
Yeah. So
this should be 1.
Yeah.
There's no reason this should be 2 CP.
Yeah, and that's right there is the worst part about it. That's the reason I would never use it. I think it's a phenomenal stratagem because, first of all, you're not using other miracle dice. You would, if you got a 6 and you want to use this 6 to auto pass, that's pretty awesome.
You're also only limited to 1 miracle die per phase.
Right, right. So
that's why you can't.
Unit per phase.
That's why you can't use. That's kind of why you have this, is because you can't use 1 miracle dice for the hit and then another miracle dice for the wound.
That's right. Yeah.
That's kind of why they have this.
Yeah.
But at 2 CP, it's just completely overcosted.
Right, and I think that's where the problem lies, is the fact that, well, one you're spending 2 CP on this stratagem.
And
this
then a miracle
should
die.
never, ever, ever be 2 CP on one single thing. Now,
on 1 single roll.
With that said, if you need like a melt-a-gun to hit, because it's game-changing, like if that knight is sitting on a 3 wounds or whatever, and this is the make or break between whether or not you win or lose the game, then yes, I can see that being useful. But how often is that going to happen when you have 2 CP left? Probably not very often.
I'd rather use my 2 CP on other things.
Well, that's the thing, is you can always command reroll if you need to.
I can command reroll that wound.
Roll the wound.
I mean, I'm probably wounding on a 4, if not 3.
Yeah.
I'll just use a command reroll to reroll my wound.
Yeah, this stratagem's great. It just has no business whatsoever being 2 CP. Nope. There's no excuse for that whatsoever. That's silly. Otherwise, I think you could find a use for it. We have a couple in here. Test of Faith and Vessel of the Emperor's Will, I think, are both pretty good. So that's when you perform an act of faith, you gain a miracle dice for 1 CP. Part of the problem with this is you're trading CP for a miracle dice. But if you have CP to spend and don't have the miracle dice, that can be a game changer. So even though it does trade down, in my opinion, if you still have the CP left over, it can be fine.
It's nice to have that extra pool of resources you can dip into.
Well, and sometimes you absolutely have to have that miracle dice. So gaining a miracle dice can be useful. I think it's all right. It's just one of those things where
it's a little questionable because, again, largely anything you can use a miracle dice on, you can just use a command reroll on.
That's right. Yeah. And so what this would actually do is allows you to kind of use 2 command rerolls in one go, because you're trading a command dice you're trading 1 dice for a command miracle dice, and then you're using a miracle dice and a command dice if you need it. So
it's one of those where it's nice to have, but you might almost forget that you have it.
Yeah. Well, and there's a lot. Like again, you're more than likely going to have more miracle dice than you have command points in most cases. Those things just pop up left and right all throughout the game. So it is situational, and I think that's the only problem with it. Test of Faith is the other one I want to talk about too. That's just use a stratagem at the end of the phase when you gain a miracle dice as a result of Purity or Valor. So that's passing a morale test, or Purity. I think is one.
No, Purity of Valor is specifically when you roll a 1 on your morale test.
Right.
So that one, because you have to roll a 1 on a morale test.
Yeah. So again, this is situational, but you gain D3.
I feel like you're going to forget you even have this.
Well, yeah, it's one of those things where it doesn't come up very often. But when it does come up, it's very interesting. Now, and what's funny about this, and I think the reason that this is so good...
Yeah, because you can't use a miracle dice to get that 1.
No,
right?
No, you can never use
it's
a miracle
a natural
dice
roll of 1.
Dice. But what's interesting about this is, and I think a lot of people overlook this, every single time when you're playing Sisters of Battle, even if you would automatically pass the morale test, you should get it in your head that you always, always, always roll to see whether or not you fail morale. Even if you auto-pass the morale.
Yeah.
Because if you roll that die and roll the
Yep.
1, even though you're, no matter what, going to pass,
generate more dice.
you can still generate a miracle dice. And then Test of Faith for 1 CP to gain up to 3 new miracle dice. That's pretty big.
Yep.
I think it's one of my favorite stratagems because it's so heavily overlooked. And because of the fact that people don't really look into, well, if I'm automatically passing leadership, why would I ever need to roll for it? Where in this case, this is like, hey, yes, roll for that leadership test because now you're gaining miracle dice.
Because the opportunity. Yep.
Yeah, because it's there, and I think people overlook it. I think that's why I like it so much, just because it's one of those things where you wouldn't normally think to even bother rolling, but this kind of forces people to like look back and be like, oh, hey, maybe I should be rolling for this. So I think it's an interesting one.
What is it? The Martyred? Where is that one at?
That's the one where you gain command points, right? I think it was back. Yeah, Martyred for 1 CP. When Adepta Sororitas character is destroyed, use a stratagem. As long as your Warlord doesn't return to the battlefield using Miraculous Intervention or Divine Intervention, gain D3 command points.
Yep.
Spend a CP
So
to gain D3.
this is a really good one because you're spending CP, basically getting it back because it's between 1 and 3 command points.
Yeah.
It's just a little weird, I guess, because you might be spending a CP just to get 1 CP back.
Yeah.
And then you're no farther ahead.
Well, it's only a one use per game thing. It doesn't say
Yeah.
it, but the fact that it's only on your Warlord is the problem.
It's only on your Warlord.
So it is very situational. There's a lot of times where this won't come up in a game. But with that said, when it does happen, because people do lose their Warlords,
Yeah.
it feels bad to lose your Warlord, but now you're spending a CP to gain command points because your Warlord died.
Yeah.
And then you gain a miracle dice on top of it because when a sister's unit is destroyed, you gain miracle
1
dice.
if not 2, depending on what you're playing.
Right, so you're even though it feels bad to lose your character, you're still gaining stuff out of it, which kind of softens that blow a little bit, which I think is phenomenal.
It's definitely one good to have when you do lose your Warlord because you can potentially gain command points off it.
Yeah.
But it's also a little weird because, like I said, you might be just gaining 1 CP back and then you rolled some dice and wasted time.
In worst case scenario, that's really all you're doing is you're wasting a couple of seconds to spend a CP to gain a CP. It's like, all right, well, I did nothing, but at the same time, the chance that you have the possibility of getting those extra 2.
The chance was good.
It's pretty good. So.
Venerated Saint.
Venerated Saint is my favorite stratagem in this book.
It's practically an auto use,
if you're running
but
a
not
Magifier,
always.
If you're not running a Magifier, I don't know why you're playing Sisters.
So it only works on a Magifier.
She's got the banner. She's bringing the ladies.
You can select 2 of their. So they have 3 abilities, and you can select 2 of them instead of 1 because at the start of the battle you select 1, and they have that aura throughout the game.
Yeah.
So now the effects you can get is the plus 1 to your invulns, the plus 1 to your strength, and I think the last one has to do with morale. So you pretty much don't take that one. But this is almost an auto use because for 1 CP you gain the second ability.
Yeah.
So
2 of the 3 traits. Now the tail of the.
Where are you?
The tail of the, I don't know, whatever, the one that gets leadership is not a good one.
Yeah.
But the tail of the Stoic and the tail of the Warrior, those are both phenomenal.
So, Tail of the Faithful, you can reroll Deny the Witch test.
That's
so,
the one that you might not use.
You might not use that because you might not be fighting against Psychers. Now, Tail of the Stoic gives you the, that's the one that,
0.
yeah, AP minus 1 equals 0. So that's not the invuln
best
one.
one on the list
Yep.
of the 3.
Yep, so you're almost pretty much always going to be taking Tail of the Stoic, and then you might be taking Tail of the Warrior for the plus 1 strength to order units within 6.
Tail of the Warrior is always good because of the fact that you're turning Strength 3 models into Strength 4, which means that they're wounding even the best infantry in the game the best regular infantry in the game on 4s. So
yep. So
it's good.
So Tail, the one against Psychers, you're almost because Venerated Saint, you can just pay 1 CP. Oh, I'm fighting Psychers. I get to now have reroll Deny the Witch tests, which is really good.
Yeah.
Or if you're not fighting Psychers, say like you expect to be in combat a lot, like against Tyranids or something, I'd like to have an extra strength, please. For 1 CP, I have an aura that just gives plus 1 strength.
Yeah. And I think the reason I like this stratagem, and this is by far my favorite in the book, is because of the fact that it's not situational either.
No.
You use it when you need it.
You use it when you need it,
you don't
and
spend
it
a
lasts
CP on it.
all game.
Yeah. As long as your Magifier's alive, you're going to make a use for it. Now, again, you don't always need... I mean, first of all, you don't always want your sisters in combat, so the +1 strength isn't always useful. The rerolling psychic tests, or psychic denies, or whatever it is, that's not always useful. But, with that said, it's one of those things you use right before the game, so you don't necessarily ever need to use it.
No,
you can
don't have
save
to.
your CP, and you never have to blow your CP on it.
Nope.
It's a use as need, and I love stratagems that are use as need,
Yep.
especially the ones that are right before the game. They are so powerful. Like you look at the Raven Guard one, where I can spend a CP to move a unit 7 inches or 9 inches, whatever it is, and I can reposition them. Another one's like the Thousand Suns stratagem, where before the game starts, you can spend a CP to swap your Rubric Marines around, stuff like that. It makes the it's because of the fact that you never actually have to use it if you don't want to. It doesn't lock you in anything, and it's a reaction type ability. I think that's partly why it's so good. Had this been one of those things where you got to put it in your list and then use the stratagem before the game, there's a lot of times you're going to just waste a CP to do something you really don't care about. So it's reactionary, and that's why I like it so much.
Another one that's very similar, like in situational, is Suffer Not the Witch. For 1 CP, an Adepta Sororitas unit, when either they shoot or fight, as long as they're attacking against a unit that has a Psyker in it, they get to reroll their wound rolls. So it's situational because it needs to be against a Psyker.
Yeah.
But if, like you said, if you're playing against Thousand Suns, having reroll wounds for 1 CP is really good.
Yeah, I think this is an interesting stratagem. There are certain armies where this stratagem becomes incredibly good against. There are also, again, it's one of those reactionary type stratagems where you don't, there's a lot of times where you won't use it, but it's cheap, and that's the thing. It's not like you're spending 3 CP to do something like that. Reroll wounds is always a good thing because there isn't a whole lot of them passed out throughout the game. Especially when you look at like Sisters of Battle. Now they are getting the character of the Palatine, which adds it, which is great.
But otherwise, they really don't have reroll wounds.
There are
outside of like Miracle Dice.
There really isn't a whole lot of them. So
Lord Commanders.
reroll hits, they're all over the place. But rerolling wounds, that's a little bit more of a tricky one. Especially in an army that again has strength 3 as its base, and a lot of its weapons are strength 4 or less.
Well, 4-ish, yeah. Like the hand flamers are 3.
Well, right, 4 or less is what I was saying. Like the bolters being the standard.
They have a lot of bolters, flamers, and meltas.
So when you start rerolling wounds on those kind of
much what
weapons, it turns up the power on them quite a bit. So I like that stratagem.
The next one here is Storm of Retribution. So that only works on your Retributor squads, which are your sisters with
again, one of the better ones in the game.
With the heavy weapons. So depending on what they're equipped with, if they're a flamer, a melta, or a heavy bolter, you get a different effect.
Yeah.
It costs 2 CP to use this, so it is really expensive.
Worth it every time.
I'd say it's questionably worth it.
No,
because
this is so worth it every time.
So if it's a heavy bolter, you get to add 1 to the roll. If it's a heavy flamer, you can re-roll the wound rolls. If it's a multi-melta, you add 12 inch to the range, and then +1 to the damage. So that, in my opinion, is the best one.
Far and away the best one.
Yeah. Especially because you're increasing your range by 12 inches.
Yeah. So the multi-meltas are already the best weapon in the Retributors' arsenal.
Yeah.
Now they become plus 12 inches. Your 36-inch range multi-meltas at half range are doing D3.
So at 18 inches.
D3 +3 +1 damage. So minimum of 5 damage.
Well, D3 plus what?
Are they D3 +3 now?
No, the new meltas are D6 +2.
Oh, +2. I'm sorry.
And this will be +1.
Yeah, so D6
so it'll be
+2
D6
+1.
+3.
So minimum of 4 damage.
Minimum of 4 damage.
Minimum of 4 damage meltas. That is incredibly powerful, especially when you tack on the 12-inch range, making that half inch another 6 inches longer than it otherwise would be.
Now, Retributors, they can only have 4 heavy weapons in the unit, right?
They only have 4 heavy weapons, so only their multi-meltas.
Yeah, so only the multis are good. So 4 weapons for 2 CP are going to get +1 damage at 12-inch range. It's a little questionable.
Let me stop you there. You spend 5 points per cherubim, and now you got 2 extra shots from multi-meltas. And multi-melters are 2 shots apiece.
How long does it last?
It lasts until the end of the phase. End of the phase.
Oh, okay.
So here's the thing. Multi-melters are 2 shots apiece now. So that's 8 shots minimum.
Oh, they are.
Yeah.
They're
Minimum.
multi-melters.
8
Yeah.
shots minimum at half range, which with this stratagem are 18-inch range, are now turning up to an additional. Now they get to fire again, so that's an additional 2 shots per sister that's firing the cherubims. That turns up to 12 shots for 2 CP at 18-inch range, with now 4 minimum damage up to a maximum of 7, 8, 9? 9 damage.
Yeah.
This stratagem is it's bonkers. it's ridiculously good for 2 CP.
Yeah, I forgot about the changes to multi-meltas being so incredible.
If it wasn't the 2-shot multi-meltas, and if it wasn't the fact that you could add the cherubims in there, yes, this would be an expensive stratagem.
Yes.
But the cherubims alone make this really good. And then the fact that multi-meltas are now 2 shots apiece is just wacky strong.
Yeah.
I don't know why this is still a thing even. I'm surprised this hasn't been FAQ.
Well, because it's the 8th edition book.
Well,
it hasn't been updated
I get
yet.
it, but like it is so strong that I'm surprised Sisters hasn't come out with a new FAQ changing this.
So yeah, after doing all the math, it is really good.
Yeah.
However, you can run out of CP real quick, because if you're using 2 CP every turn.
Right. I mean, you are burning a lot, and it is only 1 unit. I get that too. But now you're also considering too, like, even like the heavy bolter and the heavy flamer options are quite interesting, because the heavy bolter, the +1 to hit, well, now your sisters are getting 3 shots per heavy bolter, right? And they're all 2 damage apiece now because of the new profile. So this stratagem went from 8th edition okay to 9th edition incredibly strong, because now you got 2 damage heavy bolters rocking around out there.
Yeah.
Times 4, so that's 12 shots, and then the cherubims for another 6 shots. So now you got 18 shots at strength
+1 to
5,
hit.
AP -1, 2 damage apiece that are hitting on 2s with probably a canoness nearby for rerolling hits.
For rerolling wounds, yeah.
And then you also have that stratagem in there for against psychers or whatever for rerolling wounds.
For rerolling wounds.
So
yeah,
now in
you could
addition to
start
that-
really throwing CP as a single unit
now-
and make it super deadly.
And again, like I said, I mean, 2 CP sounds like a lot for the stratagem to start with, but when you start to break down what that actually entails, ballistic skill 2, 18 heavy bolter shots is a lot of shots and really accurate.
Yeah, so that's one stratagem the sisters don't have. They don't have like endless cacophony, because if you could use this and then shoot again, oh no,
Right.
oh no.
Well, and if you look back at like their old Act of Faith where they actually could shoot twice, could you imagine like this wrapped into that?
No.
There's a reason why they've made the changes they have. In addition to this, the heavy flamers one is interesting as well, because you get to reroll wound rolls.
You get the reroll ones.
Heavy flamers and heavy bolters aren't generally super.
Because you're
accurate.
already auto hitting, so getting to auto hit and reroll wounds is pretty strong.
Yeah, and again, like I said, with the cherubims,
But,
that's an additional 2d6 shots you otherwise wouldn't get.
They got the new flamers, right? Which
They
is
did.
12 inches.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I think
that's good.
actually their flamers, I think they get a bonus to the range on their flamers too, if I'm not
Oh
mistaken.
yeah, they do, don't they?
I think they get another 6 inches or something like that to their flamer
Yeah.
shots.
The Retributors get.
So they're actually slightly more impressive flamers. I think they're 18 inches or 16 inches, something like that.
4 inches to their flame
4
weapons.
inches, okay,
So
so-
16.
So yeah, 16-inch range with rerolling wounds, and they have the cherubims for another 2d6 on top of that. So yes, when you look at Retributors by themselves, 4 models with heavy weapons doesn't sound like a ton, but then you're paying 5 points for an additional cherubim, and you can take up to 2 of them.
Yep.
When you get 6d6 strength 5 AP -1 shots with reroll wounds, that auto hit, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Even for 2 CP, it becomes worth the cost. Yeah, this stratagem again is one of my more favorite ones in the book. Granted, you do have to take Retributors. There are situations where you're never going to get your Retributors to be able to utilize this properly, but if your Retributors get there and they can use this, oh my gosh, step out of the way, because everything else is dead in their range. So, of course, yes, definitely more scary on multi-meltas than anything else, but I think the 2 CP is justifiable for all 3 weapon types.
Yeah, especially with the increases.
And again, you can
into
pair
ninth.
other stratagems and other abilities to even compound the
Even further.
stacking further. So, Yeah,
Yep.
it really adds up.
But going to the next one, Last Rites is absolutely amazing. For 1 CP, you if you have a Hospitaller in your army, you pay your 1 CP, and any Adepta Sororitas unit within 6, you do not add the models that were destroyed when you take a morale test.
Yeah.
So basically, you're going to auto pass.
This is a way to sort of get a pseudo auto pass in your list.
For 1 CP.
And the fact that you can use it every turn. It's not a once per game sort of deal either.
Yep.
So
And the other thing is, it doesn't like make you auto pass. You still roll. So if you roll a 1, you get a miracle dice.
well, even if you auto pass, you can still roll, with the exception of the stratagem where you pay 2 CP to automatically pass.
That's what I was saying. This is a cheaper auto pass stratagem, and it's for every unit within 6, and you still get to possibly generate
miracle dice.
Miracle dice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a good one. It's a little tricky to use because of the fact that you need the Hospitaller nearby.
You need the Hospitaller, but she
but-
probably is because she's a Hospitaller.
Well, and the fact that this army likes to run in a blob anyway, they kind of stick together. So a lot of times you're going to be able to utilize it just by sticking your Hospitaller near the Magifier and whatever. So yeah, I mean you can still utilize it. I think it's pretty good. It allows the sisters more morale, ways to ignore morale that they don't offset have, and I think that's partially why it pushes out some of those ones that give +1 to leadership, stuff like that, because sisters generally don't fail. Between this and the auto pass, they're generally not failing leadership anyway. So
moving into Devastating Refrain.
Yeah.
So 1 CP you can spend. You can use this on your Exorcist, and you get to re-roll the number of shots they get.
Yeah.
Now the problem I have with this one is it's almost not useful, because unless you're taking the other weapon, so you have 2 possible weapons you have on the Exorcist. One has 3d3 shots, the other one has 3d6. Now on the 3d6, re-rolling the number of shots you get seems really nice. But the problem is you're not taking that one because
well, it's only strength 5.
it's
AP
strength
0,
5,
1 damage.
yeah, like AP 1, 1 damage, something like that.
like
It's used for clearing out hordes.
Yeah.
But your Exorcist, you're going to want to take the other one because it's strength 8, AP 4, like D6 damage.
Yeah.
These are just...
No, it's 3 flat damage.
I think it's...
damage.
Yeah, I think
3
you're right. It's 3 flat damage. But like these are like your anti-tank weapons. And you get 3d3 shots with it. Now, you can spend CP and re-roll those when you get it, but you're going to average 6 shots. And when you re-roll, you might possibly just end up with 6 again.
So
you're spending CP to very unlikely get more shots.
So, okay, I'm on the other end of the spectrum for this stratagem, and it's primarily because of the fact that it's any or all of the dice.
It is.
So you're rolling 3 dice and being able to control shots that are d6 damage a little better, I think is pretty good, because 3d3 shots that are strength like 8 or 9, AP -4, and d6 damage a pop, or sorry, not d6, 3 damage a pop.
They're
Pretty sure
no, they're D6 damage.
They are d6 damage. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, 3d3
heavy
shots,
3d3.
d6 damage. Now, again, like I said, you can control the number of shots that you have, and that's never a bad thing. You look at guardsmen, stuff like that, when they can control the amount of shots that they have. Granted, it is, 3d3 shots, potentially it's only 9 dice max, so it may not have a massive impact. But, like, look at a scenario, like having this stratagem for 1 CP around when you roll 3 1s or 3 2s on your die roll of a d6 for d3 number of shots. So a 1 or 2 on your number of shots, getting able to re-roll all of those dice is pretty big.
So the problem is it's before the roll, though. You have to spend this before the roll. When you select it to shoot, you have to spend this.
It's spent when the Exorcist model from your army fires Overwatch or is chosen to shoot with until the end of the phase. Yeah, so you do have to do it ahead of time.
That's the problem. You can't see what your results are.
I've run into this problem with my Tau codex as well, because the Tau have one just like this. It's a Borkon stratagem that it's you get to reroll your number of shots for one of the die. This one I think is a little better because it's any or all of the die, and it's multiple dice instead of just one. And the reason I like this is primarily because of the fact that, yes, you are spending a CP, but if you really need your Exorcist to do something solid in a turn, you can make it do something solid in a turn.
Yeah.
It's, again, still you're taking a risk on using the stratagem because the fact that you're
It's
using
such a big risk in my opinion.
I don't like the fact that it's not reactionary. I wish it was a reactionary stratagem.
I'd like it a lot better too if it was.
But with that said, I still think it's useful, especially if you have an exorcist that you really need to kill something.
Because in my mind, you're going to spend 1 CP, you're going to roll like a 1, a 2, and a 3, and you're going to be like, okay, I'm definitely going to reroll a 1, possibly get 1 or 2 extra shots. Rerolling that 2 could potentially get me less shots, so maybe I'll just leave that. And say like you roll a 2 with that first die, you generate 1 extra shot for a CP.
Yeah.
How worth it is that really?
It's not for 1 shot.
Now, when you roll like 3 1s, obviously you get to reroll them all and
Yeah.
potentially gain like 6 more shots.
Yeah.
In that case, it'll be good, but that's the best situation.
Yeah. I think okay. So yeah, by itself, I don't think this stratagem is super great. I think it's good, but it can be useless. I 100% agree with that. Now I believe there's another stratagem in here that allows vehicles. I could be wrong, but I think there's one in here that allows vehicles to like reroll hits and wounds or something like that. I don't remember off the top of my head what it's called, but I remember it getting used against me one time. And
I don't recall seeing that one.
now I know I played against a guy who was using this on me, and he used it against a Valkyrie and was able to reroll a bunch of stuff. So what it allowed him to do is allowed him to get max number of shots, and then in addition to that,
You sure someone wasn't pulling your leg?
no, I'm pretty sure it was something in there. I could be wrong, but either way, I think the Canoness still gives reroll 1s to hit. So when you pair it with that, even I think it becomes interesting because again, making your exorcist really accurate and consistent in damage, I think, is always a good thing, and it gives them more potential to kill stuff like vehicles and stuff that they otherwise wouldn't. And now, if this was like 2 CP, this would never ever see use. For 1 CP though, again, it's one of those things you got to weigh. Do you have the extra CP to use it? Yeah, okay. I don't know. I don't think it's bad. I just think it's, again, I don't like the fact that it's not situational. Or not,
I find it way too risky for what you're paying.
Yeah. It's a risk you take for CP you might not. It might go to waste. So, yeah, it's a tricky one.
But Deadly Descent. So this is a weird one. I absolutely love the thing because...
Well, this is the increase in 6 for pistols.
Yeah, so for your Seraphim squad, those are the ladies with the jump packs and the 2 pistols.
Yep.
So when they come in from Deep Strike, because they have that ability, you spend 1 CP and they get plus 6 inches to the range of all their pistol weapons, including their hand flamers or infernal pistols if you have them. And then you get to shoot in the movement phase, as if it was your shooting phase.
Right.
So that's in addition to what they get to shoot in the shooting phase. So even if you're just rocking the basic pistols, you spend 1 CP when you come in to shoot out. They get up to 10, so that's like 20 pistol shots, and then you get to 20 more in the shooting phase.
Yeah.
That's a lot of firepower for only 1 CP, and that's like one of its weakest results. Because it gives 6 inches to the range of your pistol weapons. So the Infernal pistol and I believe the hand flamers are still only 6 inches.
They're just outside of the range.
So they're just outside of the range. But this stratagem gives them the range to attack when they do come in.
Yeah.
And you can have up to 4 in there.
So
so the Infernal pistols are basically melta guns.
They are meltas.
And you'll have 4 of them coming in for 1 CP.
Yeah.
Just surprising someone with 4 melta guns can be devastating.
Yeah.
I mean, look at what the Cold Star does. That's basically what a Cold Star does.
Yeah.
For Tau.
So this stratagem, I think, is necessary because of the fact that unless you're running a lot of Seraphim with nothing but bolt pistols, which I don't think any. Is there ever a reason to run Seraphim without special weapons? Probably not.
The special weapons are definitely where it's at. I do like the basic pistols, but they struggle against
it
like
just
heavy
seems
armor
kind of
stuff.
silly you would run like a whole bunch of bolt pistols when you can just take bolter women instead. The Zephyrim are what come to mind for me because you get the bolt pistol and the sword for roughly the same cost. Now, the reason I think this stratagem is necessary for Seraphim is because when you're taking Seraphim, you're taking them for the fact that they get the special weapons. It turns them into deep strike assassins. And they otherwise could not use their Infernos or their Heavy Flamers without this stratagem. My only problem with this is that it doesn't last past this ability.
No,
So
it doesn't last in the shooting
you
phase.
do get a round of shooting with that extra range, which means you get 4 Melta shots that you wouldn't get otherwise. But then during your shooting phase, you lose this, so now you can't do it again.
Yep.
And the fact that only 2 Seraphim can carry the dual pistols of the special weapon type, you only get 4 max. So you're spending a CP to get 4 shots, which I think is nice.
Now, it can be on a minimum squad of 5, and you can have 2 of them with the special weapons. Right. So you can keep it very minimalist to those
which is
special
what you
weapons,
probably would do. Basically, what it turns them into is like really deadly raptors, kind of.
Yeah.
Because
I loved my raptors. So
well, right. So they drop down, and they can really do some damage to a unit, and that's before the shooting phase happens. So,
yeah. That's one thing I was going to mention, is that's in the movement phase. So if they kill something with this attack, you actually generate a miracle dice, and then you can generate a miracle dice in the shooting phase as well.
Yeah, and again, like I said, this stratagem is absolutely necessary for Seraphim. It's not my favorite stratagem in the book, but because of the fact that Seraphim I don't think would be usable without this stratagem. I shouldn't say not usable, but they would otherwise be useless offensively.
They're questionable.
Because bolt pistols really don't do much damage. And even if you're getting the plasma pistol on the superior, it doesn't add up to enough to justify their points cost by itself. But then when the Meltas drop in, the Heavy Flamers drop, or the Hand Flamers drop in, it becomes like a lot of power that you get just from this stratagem alone. And then you can follow up in the shooting phase with those little piddly shots that they get again. So
there's definitely
it's good.
And there's definitely a couple ways to play it. Like we said, you can specialize it with the Melta guns and definitely surprise the back end of a tank. Now you really have to kind of gear into it this way, but I think there's plenty of merit to, like I said, taking a unit of 10 of them, playing the Bloody Rose, so now their pistols are AP1, dropping them in, getting your 20 shots in the movement phase, potentially generating a miracle dice, and then getting 20 more shots in your shooting phase. So you have this one unit that just pumped out 40 AP1 shots in a single turn.
Yeah, and this stratagem,
for 1 CP.
This stratagem becomes better the bigger the unit is. So I think it's a good stratagem, and like I said, again, it's absolutely necessary for Seraphim. If you're running Seraphim, you have to save CP for this stratagem. Otherwise, your Seraphim are probably not doing much throughout the game. I mean, granted, they can still pop down and get you some secondary points if you need it or whatever. Potentially hold an objective over throughout the game, but offensively, they're not super great without this stratagem.
No, I've definitely seen my wife play plenty of games where they come in and those bolt pistols struggle to kill Space Marines.
I think
it happens.
One of the funniest
They're
things
AP0.
about this stratagem is this stratagem actually pairs really well with the Holy Trinity stratagem, which requires you to use a Flamer, a Melta, and a Bolter.
Yes.
And they can have all 3 of them in the squad. Now, I think
can.
it gives you +1 to... I'll say it's +1 damage.
+1 to the wound roll. So, we'll go over Holy Trinity. So,
it's 2, isn't it? I thought there was 2 different things.
So if you have a bolt weapon, a flame weapon, and a Melta weapon in the unit, you can spend 1 CP on Holy Trinity, and then when you have all those weapons attack the same target, you get +1 to wound that target.
Right.
So you're basically getting like Vets of the Long War. You just provided you need these 3 weapons, which the Seraphim can get that.
Right, because you take the Hand Flamers on one, you take the Infernos on the other, and then you take the Bolters for everything else.
And then you'll spend 1 for Deadly Descent to get the extra range on the bolters or the weapons, so they're in range, and then 1 on Holy Trinity, so you get +1 to wound with them.
Right.
So all of a sudden you have like bolt. It's every weapon in the unit.
All of them get +1 to wound.
So now like
your Hand Flamers are getting +1 to wound. That's pretty nasty.
Yeah.
The Bolters are getting +1 to wound. Or the bolt pistols are getting +1 to wound. That's also pretty nasty.
Yep.
Even your Melta benefits from it because now the Melta's wounding probably on a 2+.
Yep.
It is good
to say they weren't wounding on it before, but yeah.
Well, right.
Yeah.
But it is good no matter what weapon's using it in the Seraphim unit. Obviously, the Bolters and the Flamers probably more so, but it really compounds, especially when you talk about what size your Seraphim squad and what all you're taking in the unit. The fact that you're forced to take a pair of hand flamers and a pair of infernos, yeah, it's kind of a problem. But at the same time, if you want to eliminate a target, this is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
They
A lot
can
of
take
focus
them out.
fire. Yep.
Well, and those melt is becoming like super accurate. I think helps a lot. You know, you're going to be hitting on 3s. You're going to be potentially re-rolling hit rolls of 1, maybe.
Potentially.
But the fact that you're also going to be wounding on 2s probably,
Yeah.
in almost every case,
Yeah.
is really good. Because now, you know, if assuming they don't have invuln saves, they're probably losing their models. If they do have invuln saves, most likely one of them is probably going to go through.
Yeah.
And that can outright kill a character. That can outright,
Oh yeah.
you know, that can do a lot of damage to vehicles, stuff like that. And then when you start adding on the bolt pistols, the plasma pistol, and all that other stuff, that it ends up being a lot, especially with that -1 AP, like we've mentioned. So, yeah, I think it's a really good one, especially paired with the Holy Trinity. So,
Yeah, because that together they're only 2 CP.
yeah.
Moving on to exceptional proficiency. Now this is the one you're probably thinking of. So it only works on Celestian squads,
yeah.
and it allows them to reroll hits and reroll wounds. But it costs 2 CP.
Yeah.
And you can only use it on the Celestian squads, which are basically just like veteran sisters. Like they have an extra attack
They're
and
an
an
elite
extra
battle
leadership.
sister. Well, they can take more special weapons.
They can take more special weapons. So it's definitely nice to have on those special weapons to guarantee you get your full effect out of them. Because you can reroll hits and wounds.
Yeah.
I don't know how well it's going to be worth for 2 CP though,
Well,
because
even less so because
you get
of the fact that
you get like a max 5 special weapons in a unit.
Dominions, I think, are 5. Maybe even 4, I don't remember. But you get a few of them, which, honestly, more than 3 might make it worth it. But with that said, the problem with this stratagem is the fact that Celestians, by themselves, if they're within 6 inches of an order character, they're getting reroll all hits anyway.
Yeah.
So the reroll wounds, I guess, is great, but you don't...
For 2 CP?
Yeah. At this point, it becomes reroll wounds. That's all it does for you. So, and the thing is, the Celestians are designed to run with characters because they have the Sworn Protector bodyguard.
Yeah, they
role.
have the bodyguard.
So yeah, I think Celestians are great. I think the stratagem's good. It's just there's a lot of times where you're going to pass on the stratagem because of the fact that you just don't need it.
Yeah. Save your CP.
It's one of those things that if you need to kill something, then sure, great, go for it.
Yeah, moving on to what you can save your CP for, Blessed Bolts is a really good one. So, Adepta Sororitas infantry unit that has Storm Bolters. You get to you spend 1 CP, and those Storm Bolters become AP 2 and damage 2.
Yeah.
So this is a really good one for only 1 CP. The only problem is it only works on your Storm Bolters, which like a few select units can get up to like 5 Storm Bolters in there. So I mean, we are talking about rapid fire 2 weapons.
I think only
so
one.
like 20-ish shots at AP 2 damage.
Let's see. So
It can really put some hurt on something.
So the Celestians are the only ones that we're going to be useful on. I don't think the Dominions can take the Stormbolt. I could be wrong. Dominions might be able to, but if they can, it's only 4.
Yep.
So
I know your basic troops can, but they can only get like 3, I think.
Not anymore. 2.
Not anymore?
Yeah.
2?
So you used to be able to take a Stormbolter on a Superior as well, so you would run 2 special weapons in the squad, which would give you the Stormbolters.
Yep.
And then in addition to that, the Superior could run the Stormbolter. Well, then they went and legended that out so they can no longer take it. So you're not going to run this on Battle Sister squads because 1 CP for 2 Stormbolters is not great. I mean, it's all right, but it's not great.
Yep.
This is going to be more useful in Celestians that can take more Stormbolters. And then if the Dominions can take them as well, you get 4 Stormbolters. Then maybe that 1 CP starts becoming kind of interesting for the damage 2 and the AP minus 2. Anything that turns bolters with an AP minus is always a good thing. Yeah. And then when you start sacking extra damage, now they're outright killing Marines. It's pretty darn strong.
The 2 damage is deadly.
Yeah. I think it's a good one for 1 CP. I really like it. I did like it better in 8th edition because you could take it on Battle Sister squads. I would have the 3 Stormbolters. So I used to run a lot of Stormbolters on
It's really only going to work on the 1 unit, but it can really do some damage.
It can pack a punch, for sure.
Moving on to Purity of Faith. This thing is amazing. For 1 CP, use the stratagem when a Psyker model manifests the psychic power within 24 inches of a Adepta Sororitas unit, not a character, just any Sororitas unit.
Yeah.
After you're denied the witch test, so you get to try and stop it first. You can then pay a CP, and on a 4+, the psychic power is just done.
Yeah.
You just turn it off.
Yeah, so this actually...
That's incredible.
This works similar with, like, the World Eaters one gets the same thing. There's a few codexes out there that get this ability. This is better for Sisters than just about any other army. Primarily because of the fact that they don't have a ton of defense against mortal wounds. But, I mean, they can build into it, but this allows you to not have to. And the fact that it's literally just turns off a psychic power. Say your opponent casts a Super Smite on a 12. Magnus casts his giant D6 damage aura. This just 4+ shuts that off.
Yeah,
I think it's great.
Again, you can only use it against Psychers, but it shuts them down.
Yeah, the only thing I don't like this for is the fact that in 8th edition you were able to reroll this result, where in 9th edition when you use Period of Faith, it's on a 4-up, it's a 50-50 chance, it's not rerollable.
It's not rerollable.
So
you can actually fail this.
It's not super accurate all the time. It's not always going to be effective for you, so you might spend CP to do nothing. And then now your army's getting bludgeoned to death by mortal wounds. But with that said, it's literally a yes or no.
Yep.
Whereas opposed to like psychic tests, it comes down to whether how well you roll. It depends on what your opponent rolls.
Well,
this doesn't care. This just says yes or no.
I feel that's one of the beauties of it is after you deny the witch attempt. So you can just be like, oh, well, I really need to stop that. I'm going to try for a 4+.
Yeah. I like this. This is one of my favorite stratagems in the book as well. I've seen it used in so many games, and it's almost always been clutch for me when I've needed it. So.
All right. From there, I don't know that there's any other ones that are really worth mentioning, unless you want to touch on any, Rick. They're either not too good or they're just a bit too expensive.
Well, I
like
do want to go over the order ones, primarily because we were talking about how like the orders pair well with the other things in the game. So like your order conviction gives you whatever, they're all for the most part usable. There's a couple that are better than others, but when you go and look through the Warlord Traits, which we've done, there's a few of those that if you look through the Warlord Traits, there's not a whole lot of them in there that really say, okay, well, this is worth taking the conviction for.
Yeah.
But when you look at the stratagems, that actually might start changing your mind. So, like, first and foremost, there's the Order of our Martyred Lady. 1 CP, when a model in your army is destroyed as a result, it's got to be a character. When a model in your result is destroyed as a result of an attack made by the enemy unit, until the end of the battle, when resolving an attack made by a model from Order of our Martyred Lady, they all get to reroll a hit roll of 1. So, literally, whatever killed your character, your whole army turns around and gets to reroll all 1s against that unit until that unit's gone. I mean, granted, it only lasts the turn, but...
yeah.
Or no, I'm sorry, it is the end of the battle. So, yeah, it will last the whole rest of the game as long as that unit's still alive. Now, it's situational because it's only one unit.
It's only one enemy unit.
But if it's a big unit, like, say, if it's a knight that decides to kill your Magifier...
With its missile, yeah.
What's even more funny is...
Yeah,
like,
it could be good.
What's even more funny is, like, rocking up a Dialogus that's dirt cheap and it's expendable. Run that into a knight. Now, all of a sudden... Your knight turns around and automatically kills that Dialogus.
I love this strategy of just throwing things at enemies to die to get a benefit.
I love Sisters for that specific reason because you can utilize their sacrifices for so many things.
Yep.
And it makes your army expendable. And it doesn't feel bad when you lose stuff.
I'm gaining stuff by stuff dying. It feels good.
Not only is their stuff cheap throughout the game, but then when they die, you get stuff for them dying. So it makes them... actually feel kind of good when you lose something.
Yep.
So yeah, anyway, so the whole army gets to reroll 1s at this point against that unit until it goes down. Like I said, against a knight, this is phenomenal.
Yeah.
Other units that really can pack a punch throughout a game, this is really good. So I think it's an interesting one for 1 CP. Basically, it's just the Canoness ability. You're probably going to have your Canonesses for it anyway. So
that's my problem with it. Is you're probably going to have a Canoness around anyway.
It might be redundant, but this allows you to kind of spread out your army if you want to, or if your Canoness happens to be the one that goes down. Well, now,
I get it, at least against one unit.
Right. This is basically like, well, you killed my character. Well, now I'm mad at you, and I'm taking you down with me.
Vengeance.
So it's a good one. I just think, again, it's situational. Valorous Heart. So this one, this was better in 8th edition, but it's still pretty good. So what this does is, whenever anything... So it's the start of your shooting phase. You get to pick one of your Valorous Heart units. That unit doesn't suffer any penalties and ignores all hit roll modifiers. So any -1 that you would get just automatically turns that off. The problem with it is the fact that this was so much more useful in 8th edition when you could stack 2, 3, 4 negatives to modifiers. This would just delete that whole list. It's still good in this edition, but it comes down to whether or not is it worth paying the CP for the -1. Maybe, maybe not. Sisters are still fairly accurate. Even at a 4+, that's still, most cases they're fine without it. So I think it's a good stratagem. It's not as good as it was. So tear them down. This is actually one of my favorite order stratagems. This one adds 1 to the wound roll for a unit that is chosen to fight with. So this is best probably on Repentia, because Repentias are strength 6. When they're fighting tanks and stuff like this
+1 to wound.
puts them on that 4-up bubble that they need to be on. It allows your units to make sure they're killing what they're trying to kill. Now, of course, it's only good in melee.
Yeah.
However, for 1 CP, +1 to wound, and this is on any Sisters unit that's Bloody Rose. So even like your Strength 3 Sisters now.
Any order,
As any
order
Bloody Rose. So even like your Sisters of Battle now are swinging, wounding on +1 to wound, which...
Yeah, in combat,
It might not be super effective, but when you start stacking in stuff, especially with all the stuff Bloody Rose already stacks, this becomes exponentially better. And
you get your
+1
extra
to
attacks,
wound is
your
always
extra
better
AP.
than +1 strength, plus stuff like that. So this automatically becomes a good stratagem just because of the fact that it's a straight wound roll, not a strength or anything like that. So I think it's a good one. It's probably my favorite of the order traits, but we'll cover the other ones too. So 2 CP for Cleansing Flames. This is Ebon Chalice only.
Oh boy.
So when a unit from your army fires Overwatch or is chosen to shoot with, until the end of the phase, do not roll to determine the type characteristic of flames. They automatically get the maximum value. So I think this is really good if you're running a lot of flamers. It is still only on a single unit.
Yeah.
But this is like really good on Retributors, especially if you're using that Storm of Retribution where you get to reroll hit rolls. Well, now on top of that, you're getting 6 maximum shots per model shooting. That's 4d6 that are automatically turning into flat 6 shots with reroll wound rolls. That becomes really nasty.
I suppose, but at that point you're spending 4 CP.
It is
on 1 unit.
It is expensive, and I get
that might all be all the CP you have left.
Yeah. It is expensive, and that's partially why I don't think it's like one of the better stratagems in here. But you look at like Salamanders and stuff, they have something similar where they can turn their flamers into a flat number of shots, always in the maximum value. It's really good. And this also can compound with the Seraphim ability as well, which Seraphim's running hand flamers, now all of a sudden they're getting 4 times 6 shots. It makes the hand flamers kind of worthwhile. Granted, you are, again, spending 2 CP.
2 CP
plus
here,
+1
is Descend, Ascend, and then like Holy Trinity.
Yeah. So you start
well,
spending,
probably not Holy Trinity.
Yeah,
but.
at that point you probably wouldn't use the Holy Trinity. But yeah, you start to spend a lot of CP for stuff like this. I do think it's a good one, but it's only one that you're going to use in a unit that has a lot of flamers. And I think it's better on probably Retributors more than anything else. So it is kind of situational.
I'd like it better if you had a unit that could like all take flamers, because I think you're maxing out at like 4, no matter what you use this on.
6, because you have the cherubims as well that can do it.
Well, the cherubs,
Yeah, so you get 6 times 6 shots, which is 36 flamer shots at auto hit. Strength 5, AP -1 damage. I don't know. It may not be worth the 2 CP for it.
I do like that it makes it automatically the max shots, not like the Exorcist one where you re-roll the shots. And that's partially why I think the Exorcist one's, it's one of those things where it's like, do you really want to use this? Yeah.
I mean, granted, it is only 1 CP for that one, as opposed to this one being 2 CP.
Yeah.
But if you got the CP to spend and you really want especially if you like your flamers, Holy cow, this makes your flamers
Sisters
strong.
do like their flamers.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I think it's all right. Okay, Argent Shroud. I think, if I recall correctly, this is one of the. Okay, so yeah, this is the one that turns them into Black Templar for a turn. So pick a unit whenever they take. This is used in the psychic phase. When they take a mortal wound, basically gives them a 5 up feel no pain against mortal wounds. Now again, this is situational.
Very situational.
However, it is 1 CP to give your unit 5 up feel no pain against mortals. If you're taking a lot of mortals in a single go, especially if they're like the frontline unit that happens to be getting bludgeoned to death by smites, this will stop that pretty well. I think it's
That's the Argent Shroud one?
It's Argent Shroud, right?
Yeah.
So I think it's good. Again, it's situational, but the fact that it's 1 CP means it can or cannot be useful. I don't think it's a bad stratagem. I just think it's one of those things you're not going to see a lot of.
I don't like it because it's situational. It's only a 5+, so you can potentially fail it. It's in the Ardent Shroud, which I already detest. And then, like, on top of all this, you can just take Ebony Chalice, I believe is the one, and get that effect anyway.
Yeah.
And you don't have to spend CP.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think it's all right. I just think it's one of those ones where...
If you're really set on Ardent Shroud, I guess you have that in your back pocket.
Yeah. It's nice to have. It's one of those things where it's just there. And then Order of the Sacred Rose. Okay, so this is a funny one. I like this actually quite a bit, and this actually might be... You might actually be able to talk your wife into sticking with Sacred Rose with this.
Yeah.
1 CP for any type of shooting to make that unit on an additional, on any 6s, get an additional hit. It is really good for 1 CP.
For 1 CP, I do like it. It's any ranged weapon, right?
It's any ranged weapon when they're shooting or firing Overwatch.
Yep.
Any 6s will score an additional hit. And it's score additional hit, not roll an additional hit roll.
Nope, not an additional
1
shot
becomes
roll.
2.
Yep.
That turns Meltas into...
It's mini Tesla for every ranged weapon
all
in
of
that
them.
unit.
Yeah. Now, like I said, again, this is great on Retributors. It's great on Exorcists. It's great on, I don't know, anything in your army, really, that's using nice, strong ranged weapons. Yeah, this is a good one, and it's almost worth taking the traits for it because of the fact that if you get enough shots, you're probably going to roll quite a few 6s. And frankly, extra Meltas compounded on top of the Meltas that this army already gets is terrifying.
Yeah.
When you're turning 8, so 2 multi-Meltas per plus so you get 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So 12 multi-Meltas with this spending a CP to get 14 multi-Meltas.
Yep.
On average. It adds up, and those Meltas can be the difference between killing something and not killing something.
So
now I'm just using them as an example.
Yeah, I definitely like this one, and I do
Bolters
feel
is another one too.
it's probably the best on Bolters because it's only on a 6. Now when you get multiple hits with your Meltas, that's going to be really good. But there's no guarantee that you're going to roll 6s.
Right.
Because it's on 1 unit, so you're probably going to be looking at 4 to 6 Meltas tops. So you might get 1 extra shot.
Yeah, there's a lot of units you wouldn't be
on
able
average.
to use this potentially.
Now, like we're talking about, Sisters of Battle, you can take 15 of them, and they all have bolters. Some might even have storm bolters. So we're talking, in rapid fire range, we're talking 30 plus shots. Yeah. Now you're spending 1 CP to potentially get, that's 6 more hits off of 1 CP.
And then when you pair that in with Blessed Bolts, for the storm bolters and stuff like that, it really adds some extra bite to your army.
So yeah, I do really like it.
I mean, the fact that it's 1 CP, I think, is why it's worth taking.
Yeah.
If this was 2, I think it might be a little too much.
It's locked into Sacred Rose, which is a shame that they've fallen so hard.
Yeah.
But it's a little consolation prize.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things where if you're gonna take Sacred Rose, it's awesome to have this. If you're not gonna run Sacred Rose, then whatever, you're not gonna miss it either. So, I mean, I think it's great primarily just because I think it makes taking Sacred Rose a little more interesting, but I don't know if I would jump into Sacred Rose because of this stratagem.
Yeah.
It just kind of helps you a little bit ease off the fact that Sacred Rose has fallen from grace a little bit. So,
Yep.
what do we have for time? I think we got
Yeah.
2.5 hours. I think we'll probably still stick to our plan to do a part 2 here.
Let's do a part 2. Okay.
Yeah, so we're at 3:06 right now. So yeah, we'll probably finish up with the data sheets in part 2. So unless there's anything else you want to go over for this before we
I don't
close
believe
out.
so.
Okay.
We covered everything except data sheets.
Yeah. So okay, we're going to finish up with the data sheets in the second portion of this video, just similar to what we did with the Tau. We actually, I guess, went a little overboard with the Tau. We just jumped in the data sheets with that too.
Well,
But,
they're so customizable.
yeah. So we're going to do a second part to this video that covers all the data sheets, kind of talks about the characters a little bit, and just go over a little more. Basically, what we wanted to, our opinions on the characters, and what's worth taking, what's not worth taking, and what orders. This might help you guys decide. Specifically how you want to gear your list. So we'll talk about that in part 2. But this kind of concludes what we're doing for part 1, just kind of going over the army as a whole, generalizing all of the different things that we think are useful right now and worth taking. Not to say that, there's everything in this book you can get away with taking and be just fine, just because of the fact that Sisters of Battle are so strong. With their transition from 8th to 9th.
They're very forgiving.
I think if you compare them to other armies, if you lose all this other stuff that we've talked about, they're not going to be on the same level as Necrons, Space Marines, stuff like that. With that said, if they lost all this stuff, and then you put them up against Tau, Eldar, Grey Knights, Chaos Space Marines, a lot of the other armies right now, they would still do fine against them. And I mean, I'm not saying they're winning every game, but they're still going to do just fine against them without all this stuff. Just because their data sheets alone really make the army strong. And then the fact that all you need to do is lock down that 4-up invuln save, and the army is 100% fine as is. So.
Yeah, they when we get into the data sheets, they have a lot of bang for their buck. What you're paying for, you get a lot of mileage out of, and that leads to a lot of reliability.
Yeah. Well, and the fact that this whole army is just cheap, like every model in the unit is just
you could have
cheap
big
for what you
Sisters
get out of
army.
it. Yeah. So I mean, I find it difficult when I'm putting together a 2K list. There's a lot of times where I've finished putting in everything in the list that I want and not being over 2K. Still being, short 100 points or something like that, and then just filling in units. Where if I go through Space Marines, I go through my Tau, I go through Grey Knights, I can fill them points up, put all the stuff that I want on the list. And at that point, then I have to start picking and choosing stuff I want to remove from the list. Or Sisters is the other way around, so you can add stuff rather than remove stuff. So I think it's really interesting when you see just how much you get for Sisters Army. The trade-off is now, with all the new kits out, they're being more expensive than most other armies. When you start a Sisters army, you got to be willing to, shell out a little extra, because every unit is so cheap, and you only get so many models per box that you really got to pay a few extra bucks to get, those enough to cover the full 2K list, and then still have some extra points or models left over to kind of mix and match stuff. So. For new Sisters players, I would recommend when you're starting an army, the base army just comes down to running a lot of Sisters of Battle troops, and then just kind of filling everything from there. You're going to want a Canoness, you're going to want a few Battle Sister squads. Everything else is pretty much just whatever you want, really.
So yeah, you only have the one troop choice, which is the Sisters of Battle, but that is by no means a bad thing.
Well,
this is a great unit. They're very customizable. They can take special weapons. They got 3-up armor, 3-up ballistic skill. They're very solid, a very solid unit, and they're cheap. Well, 15 of them is 160 points. Compared to that, to like Necron Immortals, 10 of those are 170.
Yeah, and I think
you just get more for less.
To add to that as well, I think just like we talked about with the Necrons, where like the warriors are kind of the backbone of the army. The fact that the troops in this army are really the backbone of this army, as opposed to a lot of other armies, they need help in other areas. You could get away with running nothing but Sisters of Battle and a couple of Canoness and do just fine in the game.
Probably.
Because the bodies alone, with all that objective secured, and the fact that they are very durable, is enough to keep you going. So I would recommend the very first thing you get when you start an army, Get your Canoness, get your Battle Sister squads up to where you like them. Generally 3 units of 10 or 3 units of 5 if you absolutely have to, if you want to keep on the cheap end. And then pick up an Amagifier. An Amagifier is the key to making this army work. And you have to keep it alive by throwing it right in the center of your army and then getting that aura for the 4-up invuln save. After that, I would suggest probably Celestine. And then from there, just build on to whatever else you want, because everything else is really flexible. Everything else is stuff that just adds to what you get, but it doesn't determine whether or not you're going to win or lose games. Whereas Sisters of Battle alone can cover that for you. So that's what I would recommend in terms of an army list. Mars, is there anything you want to add? Or maybe suggest otherwise?
The only other thing I would suggest is Battle Sisters are really good. You can never have too many of them. The Exorcist is another phenomenal unit. It's just, you can't go wrong with it. Like we said, you want to take the big Strength 8 missiles instead of the D6 Strength 5 ones.
Currently, they are the better ones for sure.
They are currently the better ones, and that gives you a really good anti-tank unit. Whereas the Battle Sisters might struggle in that department. So between those 2 units, you can get a lot of mileage out of your army.
Well, Exorcists fill the anti-tank role better than most other units in the game. They're cheap like Lamb and Rust tanks. They're incredibly durable. They're toughness 8. Like, I think they actually get an extra.
They're toughness 8, right?
An extra. Yeah, they are the toughness 8 tank in their army. They do get a. So they do get an extra two wounds from the Rhino. I believe the Immolator only has 11 too. So that actually makes a difference in terms of like what kind of durability they have. So I think the Exorcist is, like I said, I agree with you totally. They're a great anti-tank unit. And they pull so much weight when you put them on the board that I think they are not necessarily an auto take, but they fill that anti-tank role with just 1, 2, 3, and you can never go wrong with them. Just like with Sisters of Battle, you can just load up the board with Sisters of Battle, and your army will do just fine.
You could take 1 to 3 Exorcists and not feel bad about it.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So, but anyway, that's going to conclude part 1 of our faction focus for Adepta Sororitas. We'll be back probably either next weekend or something like that.
Probably next weekend.
Pretty soon. It'll be pretty soon where we release the second portion of this video. And then we're going to talk more about some more of our faction focuses and what we're going to release after that. But we do have a game on Tuesday, so again, make sure you guys are tuning in for that. That's going to be Carcharodons versus our debut of the Sisters of Battle. Cade's going to be running my Raven Guard as successors, along with Tiburos, the Red Wake, to rake up some, slash up some of these little girl bodies, and hopefully my faith in the Emperor is strong enough to keep the army going. Alternatively, there's a possibility Mars might end up playing the army, just depending on how things work out. But with that said, the plan for now is game Tuesday, so make sure you guys tune in for that. And then, of course, just like we always say, subscribe, leave a like if you liked the video, and then make sure you guys slap the notification bell so that way you guys are getting access to more of our content, getting the reminders and whatnot for that. So again, we appreciate all your support, and we'll see you guys back here for part 2. Thanks.
Have a good day.